good morning and welcome to the Economies and Neighbourhoods Scrutiny panel. My name's Harpreet, I am the chair of the panel and I'll just go around the panel members. Robert.
Robert Idle, Gokaward, Councillor Gokaward. Yeah.
Thank you, Robert. Gwen.
Morning everyone, Gwen Lowe, Councillor for Batley West.
Thank you. Chris.
Chris Friend, I'm a co-op team member of the committee.
Thank you, Chris. Yusra.
Good morning, everyone. It's Councillor Yusra Sain, and I'm also from Batley West. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We've had apologies from Andrew Bird. I'm just checking I'm not missing anybody because I can't always see everybody on the screen. I don't think we've got any other panel members with us at the moment, but maybe a couple might join in a few minutes or so. We've been having a few issues with IT, which our wonderful IT colleagues are helping us with. So there might be a bit of confusion from a couple of panel members that might join a little bit late. So we are live. It is an online meeting, but members of the public can access the meeting via YouTube. So I'm just going to move on to the minutes of the previous meeting. Does anyone have any comments about the minutes, or can a couple of people just put their hands up to say they're happy to approve them? Yep, Robert and Gwen and Chris, thank you very much. We're moving on to interests. Do councillors and co-optees have any interests they need to declare at this stage? Gwen?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Interest in item number 8, the Place Partnership Active Travel Progress Report, because I'm locality lead for the Batley, Birstall and Birkenshaw. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I've already mentioned that the this debate is taking place in public. Deputations and petitions. Jodie, I don't think we have any for this meeting, any deputations or petitions, and I don't think we've got anything for public question time, but are you okay just to confirm?
Yeah, no deputations, petitions or public questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Right, then we're going to move on to the first substantive item for the panel, and that's the Kirklees Inclusive Economy Strategy refresh. We do have Councillor McBride here, we have Edward Highfield and we have Jonathan Nunn. Peter, do you want to say anything to introduce the item?
No, I'll comment after Edward's done the presentation.
Okay, perfect. All right then, so I'll hand over to Edward and Jonathan. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Good morning. So I will just try and share some slides. You've had these in advance, I think, so I'll go through them quite quickly because I think the important bit really is the conversation that flows. But I'll just take you through them briefly. So that should work. Okay, so thank you for the opportunity to talk to you this morning. My name is Edward Highfield and I'm the Service Director for Skills and Regeneration, and I've got responsibility for sorry, are you still seeing my slides? Because I'm not.
We can't. We're just seeing a picture of you.
Oh, well, lucky you. Let me try. Is that better?
Yes, that's perfect.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay. And so I've got responsibility for the economic strategy, working with Jonathan, colleague in the corporate policy team. So I'll start with. Right, hopefully you can see the slide entitled Purpose. So the purpose of this item is to update Scrutiny on what we're doing around refreshing the economic strategy. I should stress really that we're just at the beginning of this process, so this is very much the first opportunity to input, not the last. I will mention briefly what's in the current economic strategy, how it's structured. I won't go into too much detail on that, but I will focus really on why we think a refresh is necessary and what the refresh is likely to cover. And really then, hopefully, that will kick off a conversation about both the process that we intend to use, but also any input from you in terms of areas of focus that you want the refresh to look at, so that we can take all of that away after today and weave it into the process that we're about to embark upon. So briefly, a little bit of an economic outlook. This is obviously very high level, But broadly, the economic picture is that despite recent economic growth, Kirklees, we know, still lags behind indicators like gross value added, average earnings, productivity, many economic indicators. Kirklees, unfortunately, does lag both regional averages and national averages, and that's something that is going to take many, many years to overcome, but is why the economic agenda has such prominence and focus, because it impacts upon everybody's outcomes. We know that the economic impact of COVID, for example, on levels of unemployment has fortunately been less severe than first predicted. If you remember, in the midst of the pandemic, we were talking about, potentially millions of unemployed. We were talking about cliff edges at the end of furlough. Some of those worst predictions of labour market impacts haven't been felt. Certainly some of the big volume employment sectors around leisure, retail, hospitality have bounced back pretty well in employment terms. But we know that pre-pandemic and even more post-pandemic, those relatively high levels of employment mask low wage economy, insecure employment, low skills, the rise of in-work poverty. So just to say, well, there's high employment is obviously nowhere near enough. We need to look at the quality of that employment, the skills, the productivity, and all of that leading to the wages and the outcomes that gives people in Kirklees. We know that COVID has widened inequality, and that the impacts of COVID, the impacts of the economy, are felt differentially across different groups, geographically across our society, as well as through different groups, different age groups, different ethnicity groups, all different aspects of inequality. And without wanting to be too downbeat about it, we know that there are major headwinds coming in our direction. We know that as a result of Brexit, there's some quite scary figures about the number of companies that used to export that have given up exporting. That is a long-term structural weakness for our economy. We know that as an underperforming region, we have got a higher number of jobs that are potentially at risk of automation. We know that there is massive inflation. One of our recent projects has just come back with 22% cost increases, for example. So major inflation across energy and labour. And we know that employers are telling us loud and clear that access to all forms of labour, not just high-skilled labour, but all forms of labour at every level, is now the biggest constraint on their growth and their survival. And the council, as a major employer, is no different, really. And this is probably even kind of become crystallized even since I did these slides with economic data last week. We know that for an awful lot of people, there is going to be a big squeeze on the cost of living with inflation, with energy prices, with rising interest rates. So there are some challenging times ahead for people, which is why the focus around skills and inclusion is even more important today than it was previously. So obviously, to respond to those kind of challenges, I think it's important that we have a strategy. We have an economic strategy. You'd expect us to have an economic strategy. This is our previous strategy was devised in 2019. So obviously we didn't know that we were doing this and then just about to go into COVID. The strategy runs to 2025, so it's still well within time, but obviously the world has changed significantly since 2019. But the fundamental pillars are around inclusion and productivity and this concept of inclusive growth. And really, this is blindingly obvious, but it's fundamental that it's the two together. It's inclusive growth. It's not growth at all costs. It's not growth that leaves people behind, but there has to be growth in the economy, because if we want to do something around inclusion and aspiration and skills at all levels, then trying to do that in a growing economy is challenging. Trying to do that in a shrinking economy, I think, would be nigh on impossible. So the two pillars around inclusion and productivity going hand in hand, and only doing things that are inclusively growing our economy, underpinned by things like skills, innovation, infrastructure, and the role of anchor institutions and social value. I think those pillars will probably stand the test of time. I think they will still be the pillars of our refreshed economic strategy, because I think it is just so fundamental to everything we're talking about. But the priorities in the current strategy are articulated as these: a big section on business, a big section on people, as you'd imagine, the role of anchor institutions and partnerships and social value, connectivity and infrastructure, and then the role of our town and smaller centres. Those priorities, again, I think we might change the wording, we might restructure it a little bit, but fundamentally, the things that were important a couple of years ago are still important and will still be important going forward. So the same sort of subject matter, I think, will be covered. But what has changed and why we think we need a refresh is obviously the changed context. So we have had some academic support. I'll mention this a little bit later, but we have got a group of academics funded through Yorkshire universities who have done a bit of a desktop peer review of the previous strategy, and they're pretty complementary, really, in terms of its sort of standing the test of scrutiny. But what has changed, obviously, is the context, particularly Brexit and COVID, around workforce issues and the general economic climate. So whilst the substance might not change dramatically, the context and the areas of focus and the emphasis that we give to certain activities might need to flex to respond to that changed context. Why have a strategy in the first place? I think it's really, really important, even more important going forward, that we have a strong locally owned set of priorities. There's going to be lots of different funding streams coming down from government, either from central government or through the West Yorkshire Combined Authority. But rather than being driven by funding priorities, we need to be led by local priorities. So having a clear strategy that sets out local priorities that we can then match to those funding opportunities, rather than being led by those funding opportunities, is really what this is all about. Focusing on those long-term structural challenges like skills, like enterprise, like productivity, some of the things that are going to take a long time to change, as well as some of the shorter term opportunities for interventions that can make a difference now, next year, the year after, and move us in that direction. Obviously, one of the other things that's changed a lot since 2019 is the Metro Mayor and the West Yorkshire Combined Authority and devolution. So highlighting the opportunities and articulating Kirklees' asks and priorities from devolution is an important element that I think will feature much more prominently in 2022 than it would have done in 2019. And then other things which are in there, but I think now will have much more prominence given the passage of time, is the opportunities and the importance of climate change. So transitioning a just transition to a low carbon economy, and the opportunities that for clean growth and for green jobs that presents Kirklees. I think that will feature more prominently here than it would have done in 2019. The links between communities and the economy and health, and that kind of virtuous circle of good quality jobs leading to better health, or the inverse of that. If you've got poor health, the barrier that presents you in terms of being active in the labour market and benefiting from a growing economy. So that the link between the economy, communities and health will be absolutely hardwired into this document. I've got a little diagram on that in a second. I mentioned the pillars around inclusive growth, and then another important point is that we are likely to commence the review of the local plan in 2022, and our economic ambition is a really important starting point for the local plan review. So what's the economic strategy, what's the economic vision, how does that then translate into land use, what does that mean for housing numbers, what does that mean for employment sites? That's really the logic flow that will underpin the beginnings of the local plan discussions, which we will start this year. We'll by no means finish this year, but we will start this year. As I've said, really, this is part of 3 interlinked top-tier strategies. So hopefully for members, you'll recognise this, that the economic strategy, the inclusive communities framework, and the joint health and wellbeing strategy are 3 interlinked top-tier strategies. You can't really do one without the other. They all feed off each other. They all contribute to each other. So this year, each of these 3 strategies will be coming through the process for either kind of rewrite or refresh, and through the process for sign-off. So the scope, we will, I think, rename what is currently an economic strategy, rename it an inclusive economy strategy to really emphasise the importance of inclusion. We have had a COVID recovery plan, and I don't think it makes sense to have an economic plan and a COVID recovery plan. I think it makes sense to now collapse those 2 together, see them as one plan. But the delivery plan that sits beneath it will pick up some of the shorter term actions which were previously in the recovery plan. As I've said, we will make sure that whatever we do speaks to and aligns to the Mayoral Combined Authority. The content will remain quite broad-based. It will encompass things like business growth, skills, infrastructure, the role of place, the cultural offer, many aspects of life. but it will also set out the catalytic intervention. So in the strategy, there are lots of things that are about creating the environment for businesses, for example, to succeed, creating the environment for people to access training and access progression opportunities. Not all of that will be delivered by the public sector, not all of that will be delivered by the council, but then there will be certain catalytic interventions that we and our partners invest in and deliver because we think they will start to create the change and have a wider impact on people and society and the economy. So being a distinction between things that we're doing to create a generally supportive economic environment and also the catalytic interventions that would form a delivery plan will be an element of this work. We will review the evidence base, which is really the first point to start with. And we will have a look at partnership and governance arrangements. I'm still relatively new to Kirklees, and what people have said to me from the likes of the university, the college, the Chamber of Commerce is almost where do we come together as a group of stakeholders and work together on economic strategy. So we need to refresh some of those partnership arrangements and really leverage the power of the big anchor institutions working alongside the public sector, the private sector, and the voluntary sector. And the plan is to have done all of that to bring a refreshed strategy back by September. So that sounds like it's a long way away, but actually when you think about the steps we need to take and the decision points, actually that it's not that far away. But we have got a bit of time to do this properly. We're not rushing to do this. There's a really important period now of engaging stakeholders, listening to their points of view, and reflecting on some of the issues that are occurring in the economy. We've got the time and the space to do that. Today, obviously, is just the start. A possible thematic approach. So this is what's in the COVID recovery plan, but basically a focus around people, business, and place. Lots of economic strategies are now based around people, place, and business, underpinned by cross-cutting themes around sustainability and inclusion. And I think there's a bit of a debate to be had about whether sustainability and inclusion should be addressed as cross-cutting themes, because actually, for me, success would be when they don't need to be added on as cross-cutting themes. They are absolutely hardwired into everything we do around people, everything we do around business, everything we do at a place level being sustainable and inclusive. You wouldn't need to have it as a cross-cutting theme if it genuinely was hardwired into everything we do at the start. So we need to play with that a little bit and see what people feel is the right outcome. But this is the approach that the COVID recovery plan it takes, and I think it's a pretty good starting point for these discussions too, but it's not set in stone. A little word on previous work that members have had sight on in terms of what we've done around the inclusive economy. So an inclusive growth group was formed in 2018 with a lot of various inputs. For example, a CLES report was commissioned, which was at the time was in parallel with some of the economic strategy development work. That's led to some quite impactful work around our procurement strategy, social value policy, and that's led to some quite kind of significant changes and impacts, such as around asset transfer, which is pretty much recognised nationally as good practice, and a lot of work around the council as an employer, linking into things like the West Yorkshire Fair Work Charter. And the point really is that this is an opportunity to bring all of that together so that we don't have an economic strategy and an inclusive economy work stream, that actually the whole thing is brought together, that inclusive economy work stream is really the DNA of our economic strategy. So whilst it might have started as parallel work streams, given just the way things happen, this is an opportunity to tie all of that together in a much more kind of coherent way going forward. We recognise, obviously, an economic strategy has got multiple audiences. It will be a document that is produced by the council, but we want partners to recognise it. We want partners to feel that it is the Kirklees economic strategy, not just the Kirklees Council economic strategy. But it will go through our democratic processes. We will absolutely work with anchor institutions such as the university, the college, the health partners, for example, to get their buy-in and hopefully their commitment to it. We really want their investment, their prioritisation to swing in behind it. We don't just want them to acknowledge it. We want them to really drive behind it too. It will ultimately speak to the wider business community, residents. It will state really ambition and vision and activity around Kirklees. So it's important that it has that wider face as well, although I don't pretend everybody will want to read it. And it also is the sort of thing that potential investors, people that are looking at Kirklees from outside, they do want to see places that have got a bold vision, that have got a plan, that have got strong partnerships behind it, that are all pulling in the same direction. It is the sort of thing that people do take notice of. And if we were meeting an investor, for example, you'd send them this document and say, have a read of this, you'll get a good feel for what we're all about in Kirklees, and then that could maybe get you the foot in the door for the conversation that you want to have with them that flows from it. And as I've mentioned, I think it will become increasingly important when we're bidding for funds from West Yorkshire Combined Authority or from government to be able to say we know exactly what our local priorities are, and this is what we want the money now to deliver. So making sure that we're led by local priorities, not by government funding streams. So the output will be a refreshed strategy. It is a refresh, it's not a complete rewrite, although we have some leeway there. If the evidence and if the view from stakeholders is then there's more fundamental work required, then that's what we'll do. But we are pitching this as a refresh rather than an absolute start again, because we feel a lot of the thinking, a lot of the substance is right, but we need to reflect the changing context and test those actions and deliverables against that to see whether indeed it does stay or whether it needs to be changed. It will focus on the long term and then also have a framework for action and delivery over the shorter term. As I've said, it will stimulate revised and sort of updated partnership arrangements to get everybody pulling in the same direction. And we'll put something on the public facing element of it, recognizing that different audiences are going to need slightly tailored output, but we can do something probably a little bit more engaging and a little bit clearer than the whole dry strategy document itself, for example, that maybe could go on the website, maybe some video content, asking the question really kind of what does this mean to a resident of Kirklees? What does it say about the place? Why is it important? What are we going to do over the next few years and how will it be different for them? So I think we can do some slightly more engaging content for different audiences rather than just a single document for everybody. We've already started a bit. I've mentioned we've had this critical friend input from Yorkshire universities, and we're continuing our relationship with the academics to drill into a couple of areas that we want to look at specifically, such as productivity, for example. What really does that mean? What does it mean for businesses? Do we really know what you would do to try and increase productivity? Making the best of all the best practice and all the academic literature that's out there. It's very helpful to us that they're able to provide that input to us. We're here today for early input and visibility and the start of the political process of refreshing the plan. We will draw together all the various forms of insight work and public engagement that have taken place over the last few years and try and synthesize all of those messages into the economic discussions. And we will then continue to engage partners externally around the drafting and all the different internal stakeholders as well across health and communities and all the different aspects of the economy that touch within the council. And then, of course, we do need to bring it through the formal governance processes when we've got a first draft, as I've said, with the ambition of getting to council in September 22. So we've got quite a bit of time, but an awful lot of work to do. But the premium really is going to be on the quality of the engagement and the quality of the discussions. So that is all I wanted to share. Hopefully that gives a good example of why we're doing it and the timescales. Obviously, we'd be very happy to take questions. Thank you.
Do you want me to add something at this point, Aubrey?
Yes, please do, Peter. Yeah, go ahead.
I think you can see that Edward's very well summed up the fact that what our ongoing strategy was and how that's been, as it were, adapted as we've moved on. I think what he's really implying is we would be just about to, what should we say, resurrect our plans and look at the future coming out of the lockdown. And a new factor in the equation, which is massive, which is inflation. We've never seen this in 30 years. We are going to have to respond to that. And the challenge of Brexit. Brexit, I don't think we've begun to realise the full significance of that. You will see its impact much more in the next 10 years, and it will be a huge negative, as we can very clearly see. We're not prepared for that, and the poorest regions of Britain are the least prepared for it, and I'm afraid we're in that category. On the plus side, the big new industries, we wouldn't even have considered industries 20, 30 years ago. The university is an industry in its own right. and all education is an industry. We didn't previously think of education in that respect, but it's hugely important in terms of investment, in terms of research, in terms of building business, supporting business on a scale really unthought of in the year, most of the years I was there, for nearly 20 odd. It was a support to industry rather than an industry in its own right. Hugely important. And by the same token, health. We've seen that as something, yes, we want to develop this alongside our economic strategy. I think we now realise it's a key industry in its own right, as well as being a service and support to the whole community. And we've got to realise that industries and support services, as we previously seen them, are essentially the same thing. And I think a lot of industries got to adjust to that. The massive investment the universities got in health is indicative of where our economy is going, where the universities' priorities will be, and they predominantly will be ours. The other big factor in the equation is what the council itself is investing in its own towns and its own centres, not merely the big ones, but also the smaller ones, etc. And I think that vision to be able to look at, and there is no region in the whole of West Yorkshire that is investing anything like what we are. And I think there's almost universal agreement that that is a sensible thing to do. It's daring, it's dangerous in the sense we're talking about an awful lot of money, and there's no perfect solution. But I think we're using sensible guidance from consultants and so on to try and make this investment of the next 5-7 years absolutely critical in terms of the future development of all our communities in the whole of Kirklees. And I think, so what we see is the scene setting, and what you will see in the next few years is an evolution of our economic strategy based on both what Edward said and what I've just said.
Thank you, Peter. Thanks a lot. Right, I'll move on to panel members now. So I think the first one I've got up is John Taylor. And just to say, if you are speaking, please have your cameras on. Thank you.
Thanks, Harper. Apologies for my late arrival. I had a few challenging problems logging on this morning. The joy of virtual meetings, isn't it? Just before I come on to my comments on the report, there's an omission from the minutes, and you'll have covered the minutes already. So in the minutes, under the items that were resolved, there's one missing that I was very, very specific about at the last meeting. I'm sure members will recall. We had quite a debate about the validity of the public engagement activities that had taken place to support the proposals for the smaller towns. And I asked specifically if a recommendation could go back from Scrutiny to say that we needed to set a target for what percentage participation we got for it to be a valid consultation exercise. And that's not mentioned in the minutes. So please, can we amend the minutes to make sure that that does go back? Because I think that was shared by most members on the call, and it's really, really important that we don't lose sight of that. So if I could just, firstly, before I go on to talk about the report, if we could just have a comment on that, Harper.
That's fine. It can go in we can amend the minutes. I don't know if there was overall majority to support that, but we can certainly put it in the minutes to say that was something that you raised. So I'd be happy to do that.
So no, I'd like to take a view from this meeting then. I want it to be a specific recommendation from Scrutiny, not just a comment in the minutes.
Yeah, I don't personally agree with it as a recommendation. I think it's quite hard to set a target and then to say that what do you do if you don't meet that target every time? I think that's pretty difficult.
Well, what you do is you keep going, talk to more people. It's really simple, Harper.
Well,
okay, I don't want to have a massive discussion about this now. We're on an agenda.
Well, I thought we'd agreed at the last meeting. That's why I'm raising it. So we will have to have a discussion about it.
I certainly didn't agree with. I'm happy for it to go in the minutes. If we want to quickly take a vote on it now, we can do that.
Yeah, well, that's what we should do then.
Okay, let's quickly take a vote. Do members want that as a recommend? Can you be very clear in terms of what you're asking for the recommendation?
So my recommendation is that when we undertake public engagement through Place Standard, we set a bar for the percentage of people who contribute to that participation. So it's really clear that it is representative of the community, because we were taking actions based on 176 people in Heckmondwike. And Peter, I mean, I can see Peter on screen at the moment. Peter actually said it was pathetic. I mean, it was reported in the paper, if you recall.
I'm not going to have
We need to be very, very clear about, if we are going to engage with the public, we make sure we engage with sufficient members of the public. There's something to be valid and treated as an engagement exercise.
Okay, but
I'm not saying what that percentage should be. That's for the people to decide. That is the recommendation I'm saying Scrutiny should take back.
I'm not going to have a massive discussion about this now, but can people put their, I know you've got your yellow hands up, but if you agree with what John said as the recommendation, can you put your hands up, your physical hands up, that you want that as a recommendation? Right, I can see 3. 1, 2, 3. So we haven't got, I think we're split basically at the moment, because there's 6 of us here, isn't there? Is that right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. No. Well, so there's 4 of us who are not agreeing, and there's 3 that are agreeing with it. I'm not going to have a massive discussion now, Martin, about this. Okay, stop. Can you? No, I'm not doing this right now. I'm not doing this right now. I'm not doing this right now. We're in an agenda item, okay? So we will no, we're not doing this, Martin.
You can't assume a preference when people haven't voted.
When we're not having this discussion right now, it's not happening. Now, I've taken on board what's been said, and we'll put that in the minutes. We'll absolutely amend the minutes to agree that, okay? And then we can come back to it, any other business if you want to, but right now I want to focus on the agenda item. So at the moment, we'll put that in the minutes. Right, John, do you want to
we are being muted when we're expressing a view. Who is controlling it? Who is muting members of the council from speaking?
Martin, we are moving on to the agenda item.
I want to know.
I am not having this, Martin. Leave it now, because I think this is. I'm not having this right now.
I've been muted.
Martin, if you keep continuing like this, it's not fair for the rest of the panel. It really isn't. I've made my point clear. I'm pretty fair as a chair. Now, you can come back. You can come back. We are on an agenda item. We can come back to this later. So can you leave it for now, please, John?
Yeah, I'd like to speak to the agenda item if that's okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
So thank you to Peter and Edward for their contributions and for sending the paper out in advance, Edward. So I've had an opportunity to have a look at it. I'm going to be there's a mention here of a critical friend. So I'm going to be a bit of a critical friend, really, because I don't necessarily agree with everything that's in here, nor do I agree with all the comments that Peter made. Peter was expressing his personal views, but expressing them in a way as though they're factual. And I think we need to differentiate between that. For example, he made a comment about Brexit, saying it's going to be hugely negative and everybody agrees with that. Well, they actually don't, Peter. That is a personal view of yours, and you're entitled to that personal view, but equally,
I'm just looking for economists are judging.
It's not consensus, Peter.
I'm afraid,
as I say,
academic circles.
Peter, I was quite happy to be quiet whilst you spoke.
All right.
It'd be good for you to, have the same courtesy.
Yeah, please, everyone, don't
interrupt. It is not a fact. And actually, there are huge opportunities. We spoke about the concerns around exports, Edward mentioned. Actually, exports are growing outside of the EU, whilst admittedly they are not growing within the EU. And that was one of the things that was always going to happen post-Brexit. And it was always going to be post-Brexit that there would be a period of time whilst things moved, changed. Some businesses grew, some businesses didn't grow. But it's not right to say that there is that it is a negative. It has the potential to be a huge positive. What I'm disappointed about, what I would have liked to have seen brought out in the strategy and perhaps in your presentation, Edward, is some of the opportunities that exports present. Because I think there is a huge opportunity that we as a council area district, whatever we want to call ourselves, has. And that is the links that we have with the subcontinent. We have a lot of direct links between ourselves and the subcontinent. We have a lot of businesses that are owned, and particularly in North Kirklees, that are growing, that are owned by people of subcontinent heritage. And there is a huge export opportunity for us there that we should be focusing on, and that hasn't come through. And I'd ask what links the council has with the Department of International Trade and what we're doing to try and build and develop those opportunities. I mean, I know that, you know, we've got a local MP who's involved in this. Have we had any conversations with him? But I think, you know, we shouldn't just go, it's all negative. We should look at what the opportunities are. And India and Pakistan are a huge potential growth market for us. And we ought to be looking at how we can use the relationships that we have within our communities that have links back to the subcontinent to build that. So I would expect to see that hugely in here. It talks about an inclusive economy, and I'm assuming the use of the word inclusion is to pick up on those diverse communities. Here's a huge opportunity that seems to have been missed here. Also in the presentation, it talks about insecure employment, but also at the same time talks about labour shortages. Well, labour shortages present a huge opportunity for individuals to move employment. So if they are in insecure employment, there are opportunities to look for better employment elsewhere. So that's a positive, whereas it was presented as purely a negative. I'm also a little worried when we talk about a lot of partnership working and meeting with partners, and I made notes as we were talking. There was huge references to the universities, the colleges, the health sector. There was very little reference to anything that wasn't public sector. And I worry, and I know Kathy's on this call and she'll start laughing in a minute, that there's a danger we'll have the same old meeting groupies. The Chamber of Commerce's represent a very small percentage of businesses, because actually the big growing businesses, the chief executives and the people we need to be talking to don't have the time to go to Chamber of Commerce meetings because they're too busy running their businesses. What you tend to find is the people at the Chamber of Commerce meetings aren't the representatives of the businesses that are growing. And we've seen that with you know, some of the work that we've done in Dewsbury with the Dewsbury Town Board. It's actually difficult to get the representatives of the businesses that are going to be our future to come along to lots of partnership meetings because they don't, quite frankly, don't have the time. So we need to think again about how we do that engagement with businesses, because it's not going to be through partnerships and not going to be through talking to the Chamber of Commerce. So I just make that point. I also, what else have I got written down here? I also worry a little bit about, I absolutely agree for some of the projects like the blueprints, we need consultants to give us guidance on specific things about regeneration. But I spent 30 years working with consultants in my, you know, my previous career. Be careful about saying we're taking guidance from consultants, because we're paying consultants to give us advice. They will give you advice that you want to hear. So you have to be a little skeptical about guidance from consultants sometimes, and make sure you are you know, checking that in other ways as well. And then I'll pause and let other people come in the second half bit. But my last question is a specific question, really, Edward. On the last slide, you talk about the timetable and what the approach and timetable is. Will the report be coming back to us before it goes to council? It wasn't quite clear, but I would hope that we will get another opportunity to scrutinise it before it goes through the formal decision-making process. You just comment on that, if you don't mind. Thanks, Harper. I'll shut up for a minute now.
That's fine. I'll bring Edward in, but just to say, as part of the timeline, it might not be as clear, but I have requested that it comes back to scrutiny before the decision making. So I've got Peter's hand up as well, and then obviously Edward will probably want to come in. So Peter, do you want to come in first, and then Edward?
I've nothing to add.
Okay, all right. Just saw your hand up. Okay, Edward.
Okay, yeah. So a lot in that, Councillor Taylor. A lot I do agree with. So I'll try and take the questions in turn. So trade. I mean, I think it's important to say this. We haven't brought you the draft strategy today. We've brought you a presentation about the process to refresh the strategy. So a lot of the detail points you're looking for, we haven't got to in the process yet. But I agree with you that whatever your views of Brexit are, we are where we are, and this strategy has to find the positives, and export and the subcontinent and getting more people to export is absolutely going to be a key part of the business section. So we have to find those opportunities. There are many. I think the examples you've used about the subcontinent are absolutely right. I suppose what I was flagging is, though, the current numbers around the number of businesses in Kirklees that have stopped exporting is a challenge. That's a fact. But I agree with you. We can't dwell on that. We have to say, well, what are we going to do about it then? And that's the role of the strategy. And it will feature, trade and export will feature prominently in the strategy. Second, similar point around labour shortages. Absolutely, that does present opportunities for people to move into higher paid occupations, to move away from 0-hour contracts, for example. But again, that puts an emphasis on skills and training. So what support is somebody that going to need to allow them to do that? That's something that the strategy will need to focus on in the people section. Again, I take the point, it might have come across as overly negative. I am a bit of a glass half empty person sometimes, but again, though, the reason I put it in there is because and I had this the other day with, albeit a Chamber of Commerce meeting, but it was a group of about 12 businesses, and they're consistently, without fail, their number one constraint was inability to recruit. So it is a constraint on growth. But within that, there are definitely opportunities for people if we can help them, support them, give them the opportunities to move into higher paid occupations through good investment in skills and progression. So definitely there are opportunities in there too. Your point around business engagement, this is something Jonathan and I have spoken about a lot. I completely agree. You know, loads of council partnerships, loads of council committees is not the way to engage businesses, particularly smaller businesses that are busy, you know, running their businesses. We need to be more inventive, more creative about how we do that.
Or bigger ones, Edward, because it doesn't make any difference the size of the business.
Some
businesses.
No, but I mean, bigger businesses might have a bit more capacity to send an HR director to a meeting, for example, something like that. Where a smaller business, you know, they're all of that at the same time. But no, I take the point. There are things such as the Kirklees Top 100. There are different mechanisms, but I'm not pretending we've got that right. Apologies, I didn't mean to suggest that a new partnership arrangement was the totality of our engagement of businesses. That would be misleading. I think you hit upon a really important element, which is how are we going to try and engage with businesses going forward, and not just rely on a couple of networks or a couple of council meetings. That's quite a profound question, and it's one that I don't think up and down the country we've really got right yet. Fourth one, just hopefully give you a bit of reassurance. The guidance from consultants, we're not using consultants to write this strategy, because in my experience you end up rewriting it anyway. I think we've got the knowledge and expertise to do a really good job ourselves. If we've got specific gaps in the evidence base or in a specific technical area, we might commission some work if we feel we need it, but we're not just outsourcing this to a consultant. The expertise bit I was mentioning was a free offer of help from some academics around the evidence base, but it's our job to compile all of that into something that we think is right for Kirklees. We're not giving this to a consultant to write. And then, yeah, as the chair has said, apologies, I didn't break down the timeline sort of forensically, but yeah, I think pre-decision scrutiny is a really important element of this.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'll move on to the next panel member, Robert.
Thank you, Chair. John covered an awful lot of ground in his initial. My independent vote was how are we improving the interface between our educational people, the university and the college and the business people, to enable us to get a right blend of people gaining skills to get the higher and the businesses having the skilled labour that they require. Far too many times the business are saying Well, but there's no one skilled to be able to take X, Y, and Z job. That's why we want people from Europe to come in, etc. How far are we going in training up and finding out what businesses want, and the education groups providing that. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Edward?
Yeah, so this is going to be a key element of the work around the employment and skills section. So underneath the economic strategy, we're also working around an employment and skills plan. A key plank of that plan is around bringing businesses and the education learning providers together, so that articulation of what business demand, what business voice is telling us, and making sure that the skills system responds to that and is employer led. That phrase employer led has been around for probably a decade, but it's really, we haven't cracked it yet. It's really important that we continue to try and help businesses articulate what they need and then match that with provision, rather than the funding always following the provider. The funding needs to follow the learner and what businesses are saying they need for the growing economy going forward. So there will be a more formal interfaces where that happens, where providers and businesses, notwithstanding Councillor Taylor's earlier point about capacity, to try and sit around the table and work together on that, rather than being two separate entities. And I think this does actually again speak to Councillor Taylor's point about opportunity. You know, with a tighter labour market, there are huge opportunities there, because businesses are going to have to invest in their workforce in order to grow, in order to retain that talent that they need. So you know, it's a bit pejorative, but while there was loads of cheap labour supply, employers didn't have to invest in training in the way that they probably are going to have to in the years to come. So that out of that does come some significant opportunities to move towards a higher skilled workforce. But everybody's going to need the support available. That support's going to need to be easy to access. It's going to need to be subsidised. It's going to need to be delivered in a way on the ground that's easy for somebody to access and make sense of. And some of the people have got multiple barriers for them to access in that. So it's not just about skills, it's about other things that are potentially preventing them from accessing the labour market or moving forward in their opportunities. So it's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen organically. It's going to need some facilitation and some support around it if it's going to have the inclusive impact that we need in Kirklees.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, move on, Martin.
Yeah, thanks, Harpreet. And like John, I had problems logging in, and I've got a couple of points about the minutes. Which do you want to take those later, or
can we please take them later? I just sort of want to focus on the agenda items, and we'll take them under any other business, if that's okay.
If we can correct the record. The couple of points today, and it ties in with what John said, because I think the presentation said we know exactly what local priorities are, and I would disagree with that, because as we've said before, and as it should have been in the minutes, the poor response from the public suggests that we're missing out on what the majority of people think their priorities are, and this will come probably to the next item as well. So we need to firm up on that, both with, and as John's alluded to, the business sector and also the members of the public, what their priorities are. I think another thing which has come through of late is when we're dealing with potential investors, it'd be good to do a check to see if any confidence in coming into Kirklees has been damaged by the issue around the promises made to the rugby league charity. Yeah, when you're dealing in business, that you say your word is your bond, and if the cabinet, as was fronting the rugby league issue, have been making promises which later have been either backtracked, reneged, or whatever. Yeah, our business owner is going to see it as someone that they would do business with. Yeah, if you're putting money into an area, you want to see that when you do a deal, you're getting what you agreed. And certainly from the reputational damage of the Rugby League Museum, that's not the sense that I'm getting out of that. And also, again, in the presentation, it was mentioned, and we've referred to it again, that the insight work on public engagement. And I think, again, I've been saying for a heck of a long time, and before Peter came out with his robust comments, that we have been lacking in this. And as you know, Harpreet, the members of the public, with regard to the Cooper Bridge engagement, felt that they hadn't been engaged with because the residents in your ward initially didn't see that Cooper Bridge affected them. So there was a communications issue there. These are things that we've got to get right. We're going to be spending a lot of money on projects, and if we're not taking the public with us, if we're not making sure that the consultation is reaching them in a variety of means, then we're failing. And again, this is something, I raised at Cabinet on a similar situation last week. The highway code changed over a week ago. Big changes for people's driving habits, for the public safety. And I asked if Cabinet were going to do anything about communicating this to the wider public. We have, in terms of communication engagement, we have roadside notice boards that we can utilise. And the response I got was they weren't doing anything until the government told them the highway code had changed. Well, it's been out there, and we have people who work in road safety who should be briefing Cabinet members. We need to be getting proactive on our engagement and getting positive responses, I think, to take things forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Martin. Edward, Peter, want to come back on that?
Thank you, Martin. You can always be assured we'll be nothing if not critical. The points you make, particularly as far as the information from the Department of Transport, I would have thought the change in the highway code, that is a Department of Transport issue. Of course, we should support the government in trying to get that message across. And insofar as we are informed, we have. And so if you've got such a criticism, Martin, then it must be, I would have thought, equally referring to both government and the district. And if anything, predominantly, it's a government's failure to get the information across. However, that's a minor detail. I think what these are caveats over what I think, if you listened carefully, Edward's presentation was a comprehensive statement of all that we have been doing, how it's been updated, how it's relevant both to a permanent situation and the situation which we've confronted with the lockdown. I think we've further informed you that now we are coming out of lockdown, we have further challenges, are well aware of that, and we're setting in motion already strategies to be able to address the most immediate problem. Coming out, and I think as Edward said, coming out of the pandemic and all of its limitations, different areas will respond differently in terms of their effectiveness. I think all the evidence is the poorer areas are going to be the poorest in terms of getting back to normal. That's a big challenge to us. But there's a general challenge, as we're all aware, the inflation levels of a 30-year high. Getting over that barrier is going to be enormously important, both in terms of the long-term economy and more immediately, the poverty that this is going to bring about within the community, a poverty we haven't seen for decades. And I think we've got to prepare ourselves for that. And I'm sure now we can put our minds to addressing the more immediate problems that we undoubtedly are going to face.
Okay, right, I'm going to move on to the next panel member, and then I've got John and Martin again. So I'm just going to try and bring in some new members before I bring you folks in, if that's okay. So Chris.
Thanks, Harpreet. Edward, it looks like you've got quite a challenge there developing this strategy. You clearly have made a very complex start. Martin picked up quite a few things I was going to raise. And I think one thing I didn't see coming through on this was the engagement with the wider public. I didn't actually see anything about a web page or anything until the final slide. I think what we're, certainly from a non-councillor perspective, we don't see a lot of things that are happening that are being done by the council. Now, the development of this strategy and seeing what you're covering it, I think will make people within Kirklees a lot more comfortable knowing that is actually happening, because you're obviously addressing the issues with inflation, etc. But we wouldn't actually hear about that until this web page eventually comes out. I think, if the web page could be accelerated a bit and put up earlier, but also it's very important to promote that web page, to let people know it's there. So I think there needs to be earlier engagement, not necessarily seeking input from people unless it's proactive, but actually letting people know what's going on. The only other thing I have is I noticed on your Why Refresh page 2 words, levelling up. This is sort of quite emotive, I think, to most people at the moment. Have Kirklees actually heard anything, let's say heard anything of substance from central government that will actually be useful to your report? That's what I wanted to ask. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Edward?
Okay, so I think on the 2 points there, the first one around wider public engagement, I think that's an entirely fair point, and we need to reflect on that. I think our view has been that sort of first base is going to be to do something and listen to what we've already been told. So we don't want to just sort of repeat previous engagements. We need to do something with previous engagements. But then I think over and above that, you have identified a bit of a gap. I think the challenge in that is going to be to do it in a way that's meaningful and engaging rather than sort of dry and boring, because, you know, comment on our economic strategy isn't going to engage some people, whereas actually what matters to you, what's going on in your community, what bothers you, how do you want to live your life, something a bit more engaging than just here's a draft strategy, what do you think? So we need to think through some of that, but I entirely take on board the point about bringing that earlier in the process. So that's something that I think we need to take away and reflect on after today. Levelling up, yeah, I mean, I think the point I was making around levelling up was, and actually this does relate to what Councillor Bolt said, I didn't intend to say we know exactly what our local priorities are as a statement of fact, that's it, we've got nothing more to learn. I think what I was trying to say was it's really, really important that we have a distillation of local priorities around the economy, so that when there is the levelling up fund round 2 or 3 or 4, or a new fund from government such as UK Shared Prosperity Fund, that we're not driven by the funding priorities of the region or national politics, we're driven by local priorities. That we, when a call for proposals comes out, we don't sit around and go, oh, what are our priorities? We know what our priorities by then, hopefully, because they're in our strategy, and we simply match the strategy to the funding and off we go. We need to get a bit quicker and slicker and more efficient about doing that. So levelling up, I mean, there's again, I don't want to stray into personal opinion, but I think it is fact that there's no new money in the Levelling Up white paper. It's not about loads of new money. It's about influencing the spend that's already there. I think where it potentially is helpful is around the challenges that are presented into the sort of the grand challenges and the big focuses of levelling up in terms of health inequalities, education, closing the gap. So there's certain kind of, I think are there 12 in the white paper, around that we need to demonstrate how this strategy is addressing and covering those kind of issues, because it's going to be vitally important to access funding in the future. The council is not going to be the sole funder of a lot of the interventions that we want to stimulate through this strategy. We are going to need to bid for funds, and if you're going to bid for any penny from government, you're going to need to articulate how it delivers against the Levelling Up white paper, so that it needs to have a read across, it needs to use the same language, it needs to be structured in a similar way, so that when the opportunities come, we can clearly say, here's our local strategy, this is the priority that we want to focus on, here's how it delivers against Levelling Up. That's your strategic case for the funding bid. So I think it's about alignment rather than anything sort of that's pulling us in a different direction.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, I can see John and Martin's hand, and I just want to come in with a few points at the end as well. Got no other hands up, so if that's the case, I'll just take these two and then I'll come in at the end. Okay, so John. You're muted, mate.
Yeah, thanks, Harper. Just to echo what Edward just said in response to Chris, I agree that the skill is knowing what we want and then writing the proposal that meets the criteria that the government set out for whatever funding's available, isn't it, Edward? It's a skill in itself, isn't it? But you need to know what it is you want in the first place to be able to do that. Just a couple of other points that have sort of popped into my head while we've been talking. We've talked about skills quite a bit and about the engagement with colleges and universities. One of my worries when I've got close to the colleges is I'm not sure their current offering necessarily matches what we believe the skill need is. And that's a challenge at two levels. One, about getting them to accept that. You know, if you want to be a bricklayer or a hairdresser, you'll probably find plenty of opportunities at Kirklees College. But if you want to do high-end engineering or get involved in textiles, it's probably less so. And yet they're the two industries that we think are the ones where we have a unique skill set, and probably the ones that we would push and promote. So it's not just about getting the colleges to recognise that. There's also then a skill gap in itself in terms of the college staff, you know, the trainers to do the skill training, because you obviously need people who have the knowledge and experience in those industries. And it links quite nicely to something that actually, on reflection, Edward, doesn't come out in the paper, but I'm sure it will be a clear focus, which is apprenticeships. I think we perhaps need to talk up a bit more about apprenticeships because it doesn't come through. And yet I know from some of the businesses that I've been out and spoken to locally, where I've got examples of really good employers, Reliance Precision here in Huddersfield, you know, when I've been and spoken to James that runs Reliance Precision, they run their own apprenticeship scheme. And it's fantastic, and they employ local people. And there are other examples, and I'm sure there are other examples that other colleagues on this call have in their patches that I probably don't know as well. And I know from sort of talking to my MP, he's done a lot of work working with the bed manufacturers, because obviously making beds is a big thing in Dewsbury, but in more broadly in North Kirklees, isn't it? And they don't feel that the colleges currently offer opportunities to train up the skilled staff that they're going to need in the future. So I think there's something there about, you're absolutely right about when we talk about engaging with colleges and universities, but it's actually about not getting them to tell us what the local priorities are. It's more about how do we help them realign their offerings to meet the needs of the businesses that are in the growth industries in our area. So that's it. They're more comments really than comments and observations, and Edward, rather than necessarily anything you particularly need to come back on. But feel free to if you wish to.
Thanks, John. What I'll do is I'll just take Martin's comments as well, and we'll round them up if that's okay. Martin?
Yeah, thanks, Harpreet. I was interested with what Peter said, that he seemed to be implying that although Kirklees has the statutory duty of road safety for the roads within its borough, for which it is responsible, so excluding Highways Agency and others, the government should be doing the job of communicating the road safety measures on those roads. The government sets
everywhere
the overall picture, and it is always, and if you travel around other authorities like I do, and obviously it's a more sedate pace than some of you when I'm cycling around, I can read the road signs better. Our neighbours do communicate road safety measures using the DFT Think material. So there's a suite of road safety messages called Think, and different images that they have on road signs, whether that's wear seat belts, etc. The Peak District has a big message on motorcycle safety. These are things which local authorities put in place on roads that they want to put the road safety message. These aren't things where government comes down to our local roads. That's the purpose of devolution of responsibility, is that the council takes responsibility for its road safety remit, which it is legally responsible for. And I'm sorry, I think you're missing the point there, Peter. The government has communicated and consulted, and I'm sure Kirklees responded on the highway code changes. But once a law is implemented, and once a change is implemented, it's up for those locally responsible to communicate that to its residents.
Okay, thank you, Martin. I'm going to just come in with a few comments, and I'll just ask them to round up, Edward and Peter to round up, if that's okay. So, thank you very much, everybody, for coming along, and particularly Edward and Jonathan for the work that they're doing on the strategy. I do think it's a good thing that we're putting a lot more focus on inclusive economy, quite clearly, I think for a number of years, we've generally focused on growth and not thought about the inequalities that come out of it. So the more focus that we can put on inclusion is going to be really important. I think a number of members have already said this, but the link between getting the skills side of this right is going to be really, really important. So linking that in with, the skills budget that's been devolved down to the Mayor and to West Yorkshire Combined Authority, and also how we sort of think about the sector focus. And there's been a bit of discussion about that with panel members as well. But are we thinking about that a little bit different about the sectors we want to focus on, given what's happened with COVID or Brexit? Or are you thinking, actually, we've got it right before and this is what we want to continue with? But again, I'd be interested to know a little bit about that. Quite clearly, inflation is going to be an issue and the cost of living squeeze. I know in terms of labour shortages, that's certainly coming out across the country. And I've certainly noticed as a council how we're be more visible about our recruitment, and that perhaps suggests there are issues around labour shortages as well. So it's something that we really need to be thinking about in the longer term and assessing the risk that has, not just for us as a council, but I think for Kirklees in general. I'm just going to quickly try and pick up my points here. You mentioned in the refresh section as well about the review of the local plan, which is taking place this year. So I'm just thinking from in terms of a scrutiny input, we need to just think about how scrutiny feeds into that as well. And again, just on the council being an inclusive employer and the West Yorkshire Fair Work Charter, I think this is going to be really, really important. And I would love to see as a council, taking on some things that we can do to be a fair employer, particularly around things like the real living wage, looking at how we look at productivity as well. There's a lot of discussion about productivity at the moment. It'll be interesting what comes out of the universities on that as well. But there's discussion about what does that look like now in the modern day, and about having that sustainable productivity as well, that helps employees and is fair to employees as well. So again, it's just more general comments I've come up with there. But Edward and Peter, do you want to sort of round off from the comments that you've just received, if that's okay? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for this opportunity to make the presentation. I'll just summarise what we've been saying. Clearly, I think we have been reasonably prepared until recently. The current situation, coming out of the pandemic measures, is a huge challenge. It frightens me to death to think what we now face. The economy's in a really bad way, and then we've got a major recession, which we are facing. We've got to be prepared for those challenges. They're social and they're economic. And the problems we have in terms of, for example, training are really deep-seated and need to be addressed anyway. But in particular, they need addressing now. But mainly, they're not within the purview of the local authority, because the training, exercise, budget, etc., deals with that as a national issue, not as a local one. Insofar as we have some say over this, I think we do our job extremely well. In fact, we're a model for the whole of West Yorkshire. But it really deals with a budget only concerned with all people who are most difficult to employ. And that is an ongoing difficult situation, which we've led in West Yorkshire for quite some time. The determination of where the rest of people go and how their needs are matched and related to the overall economy, predominantly central government factors determine those events. We try to be supportive insofar as we can. And I'm not speaking from some vague understanding, etc. I was involved in this directly for 30 years and trained trainers for over 30 years in apprenticeship. One of our problems with apprenticeship is it doesn't mean anything in Britain as it does in serious countries like France and Germany, who do take it seriously and invest properly in apprenticeship. apprenticeship in this country can mean anything. It can mean some skill training. It can mean something akin to what had been the traditional 5-year and had been 7-year apprenticeship. We have nothing like that now. But what most of all, what's most saddening is we have no strategy to deal with the needs of the vast range of different industries and their demands. There was an attempt to do that in the 1960s. It was called the Industrial Training Act. And there we tried to copy the Swedish model across all sectors of the economy. We gave up on that in the 1970s, and we've floundered around consistently since. And thus our training within Britain has been appallingly bad since. We looked as though we might be putting it right at that point. We haven't since, and we're now paying the price. But on top of that, we've got the additional challenges of coming out of the pandemic, and you've got all the consequences of the massive inflation that we're currently facing. Not to mention, and I will mention Brexit, albeit we have different views about it, but if you look at all the economic factors, it does suggest there is at least a huge challenge on getting a base in a new economy beyond what was the EU. But clearly that market, the EU, has massively gone down, and there is no evidence that the alternative is in any way picking up. That is the challenge.
Okay, thank you. Edward, do you want to add anything at this stage?
Well, no, just to say thank you very much, Dee, for your comments. I think I can see, I'm confident that a number of the areas you've mentioned, sectors, apprenticeship skills, trade, I'm confident that when we bring this back to you in a good few months' time, you will see how we've picked those up and addressed with them. I think there's certainly areas around public engagement, business engagement that we need to reflect on following your comments. So thank you for that. We will do so. And I'm confident that when we bring something back later in the year, you'll be able to see those threads that you've started today and what we've done with them. Thank you. Okay,
thank you. I'm just going to quickly round up then. So from the discussions, this is what I've picked up, and if there's anything being missed out, please come in after me. So we've talked about the opportunities and challenges of the current context. So sort of, I don't know if we can say post-COVID, but we're still in COVID, aren't we? COVID and post-Brexit, perhaps. So looking at the understanding challenges, but also what where there might be opportunities as well. There was some discussion also about looking at international trade, particularly in Southeast Asia, where we've got links within many of our local communities here. Business engagement. So we should look at engaging with many different types of businesses rather than the ones that we might normally go to. We've got something around skills, education and business links. So the offer from universities, the offers from the skills and training market, making sure that's aligned with what businesses need locally. And then we had some stuff around how we engage and communicate with residents. This is really important. We're going to make sure that's part of the process overall. Was there anything else?
Sorry, Harpit. And I should have mentioned them. When we did the economic strategy last time round, Edward, there was an opportunity made available for all 69 councillors to engage. And to be fair, it wasn't well attended. I did attend, but I think that there does need to be at some point some opportunity reach out to all councillors, not just through this scrutiny panel and through sort of the cabinet or leadership, however you might do it. But there does need to be an offer so that all councillors have an opportunity to have their say and perhaps contribute.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, to be honest. Yeah, I think you'd agree with that, Edward.
Yep, thank you. It's helpful.
Perfect. Right. Is there anything else? Okay, we've got everything sorted. Right. Thank you very much, Edward. And Jonathan, you can leave if you want to.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. Right, we're going to quickly move on to the next item, which is the place partnerships. And it's the active travel update. And we've got Vina and Emily here for that, as well as Councillor Scott. Councillor Scott, do you want to introduce the item before we go into it?
Yes, good morning, everybody. Sorry, I'm having to use my mobile. Still got problems with VPN. That was a lively debate that I've just heard. Yes, so we're here this morning to give you the update on the place partnership, and there's 7 place partners. Individually, they've come together and worked tirelessly with officers on what the priorities are for each of the wards. And it's a bit of a theme because before we had the mental health and well-being, and it's progressed now. So I tend to use the title People, Places Using Safe, Healthy Spaces, because that captures everything that they're doing in their plans of what they're doing. So I'm going to pass you over to Vina to continue this, but the work has been tireless, and they're now going back to report to the ward councillors to sign them up to their commitment to it, because this only works if they all work together. But the one crucial thing I will say you can take away from this, in place, it's never been more needed, particularly with the pandemic. We've come in at a crucial time. We've been proactively out there getting pathways and public rights of ways and different vehicles to allow people to enjoy their environment. So as I said, I'll pass you on, and I'll come in as and when needed.
Thank you. Shall I introduce the item, Councillor Uppal?
Yes, please do.
Yeah, okay. Hi. Well, first of all, thank you for the invite and the opportunity to provide an update. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Vina Randauer, Democracy Manager within the Democracy and Place-Based Working Service. What I'll do is do a very quick run through the report. But before I start that, I wanted to just highlight that the sign-off date is incorrect on the report. You may have picked it up. It should be 31st of January, not the 31st of February. So if that could be noted, please. I was ahead of myself, clearly. So as Councillor Scott has already said, that we do have 7 place partnerships, and they were established at Annual Council in May 2019. And they were established because it was recognised that there are more strategic issues that need to be responded to on a geography that's greater than a ward, and therefore they involve a number of wards working together. So there's between 3 or 4 wards in each place partnership, and they use data and intelligence to address strategic issues and themes. As the report outlines, each place partnership has a lead councillor responsible for their area, and the details of those leads are set out in the report. And as Councillor Lowe has already mentioned at the start of this meeting, she's the lead councillor for Batley, Birstall and Birkinshaw. So the lead councillors work with their ward councillors and also officers using data and intelligence and insight to identify gaps and opportunities to improve outcomes. They also come together collectively as 7 leads with the cabinet member portfolio holder to share progress with each other, discuss any common themes, problem solve, etc. And as Councillor Scott has said, that they previously worked on improving mental health and domestic abuse outcomes, and they're currently working on active travel. So I've set out in the report the process that each place partnership have adopted to help them work through their priorities for investment. So for active travel, officers from a range of different services such as public health, major projects, street scene, have worked collectively to develop an active travel intelligence pack for each place partnership. And they're developed to give an overview of the factors and behaviours that impact on active travel. And they include things like active travel inequalities, summary of strengths and challenges from our current Living in Kirklees survey, school travel data, bikeability data. They include an overview of major infrastructure and transport projects, where relevant place standard feedback is also built into those active travel intelligence packs. And those packs are shared with the councillors via their individual place partnerships, where they have an opportunity to discuss the content, add their local insight and local intelligence, and then start to work through the things that they really want to explore further. Within the report, I've given a very brief overview of the work undertaken to date by each place partnership and their emerging priorities and next steps. I've also highlighted there's a couple of priorities that are common across all 7 place partnerships, and that is public rights of way improvements and travel to school. And for those, officers are currently looking at options and costs around those, and they will be reporting what they find back with each place partnership at their next meeting to have a conversation collectively to discuss what they want to do next. Other place partnership priorities that have been identified in each individual place will also be explored, and as I say, the feedback will always be discussed back with the place partnership and councillors that are part of that. And so as projects are scoped, further engagement and consultation will be planned where needed with stakeholders. So for example, around school travel, members might want to engage with school community, or if it's around PRO improvements, maybe with local friends of groups or community groups, and that will be planned with individual place partnerships. I will say that as we develop proposals, evaluation will be planned and built in as recommendations go to Cabinet. Also, the leads are very keen that where priorities, issues and opportunities are beyond the scope of the place partnerships, that they should be considered by Council and reported to Council. So that's a very quick overview of the progress to date. There's still quite a lot of work to do before the place partnerships are at a point to make a recommendation to Cabinet for decisions on their budget. I would just echo what Councillor Scott has said, that they are intense. They do take a lot of work and a lot of ongoing involvement with the councillors, with officers, and with stakeholders as we go forward. So I am going to pause because I'm sure there's lots of questions, but also in case Councillor Scott wants to come back with any points in particular.
No, that's fine. We're open to questions. I know some hands are already up.
Thank you, Cathy, and obviously Emily's here as well, so I'm sure she'll come in as well. Okie dokie, so we'll start with the first question then. John?
Thanks, Jan, and thanks, Vina. Nice to see you.
Hiya.
I'm going to be grumpy, I'm afraid. So the experience of place partnership in Huddersfield Rural has been appalling. So there have been 2 meetings organised so far. The first meeting was organised in the middle of Conservative Party conference, when if you look at the membership of Huddersfield Rural, the majority of the councillors in that partnership or those wards are Conservative. So most of us were unable to attend. The second meeting was organised when Cabinet was on. So again, a number of us were unable to attend. So I haven't been to a single meeting yet. I haven't had any engagement from the partnership lead. Apparently he met with the 2 rural cabinet members in January, but he hasn't bothered to meet with any of the Kirkburton ward councillors. I've had some involvement, to be fair, with Julie, who is the officer supporting it. Julie's been great. But in terms of what contribution have the Kirkburton ward made to their place partnership, it is nil, because we've had no opportunity to engage, no opportunity to discuss it. And Councillor Greaves is off doing whatever he wants to do. So I'm sorry, it's been appalling. It's been a failure by the partnership lead to engage with all councillors, or even to think about arranging meetings when people might be able to attend. I've got nothing positive I can have. I have some ideas about what we would like to do with active travel in my ward. I know I've spoken to Cathy a little bit about them, and I've spoken to Julie about them, but nothing with the partnership lead. I'll pause there. Thank you.
Thank you, John. And just quickly, I just want to say, obviously, Councillor Grieve isn't here to respond to what John has said, which is fair enough. I just want to point out that he's not here.
But at the end of the day, Harper, he's got a responsibility to engage with the councillors, and he's not doing it. And my job as a scrutiny member is to point out the shortfalls in the process.
No, absolutely. I'm just making the comment that he's not here, John, necessarily to respond. That's all. But you're absolutely, you can make your comments. I'm not saying anything about that. Right then, who wants to come back on that one?
Harpreet, can I come back in? I'm sorry to hear that, John, and I know we have had conversations before about this. What I will do is take it back and talk to the place lead on that, because they should be engaging with councillors. So from what I'm hearing, from what you're saying, you feel done too, rather than being allowed to express your views as well. So I will take that back. And any other area that has that problem, if you let me know, just inbox me, pushing out an open door, and I'll take it up with the place leads, and so will Vina.
Could I just come in as well, Councillor Uppal, just to say, echo what Councillor Scott's just said. I apologise, and like Councillor Scott has said, I will also pick that up to ensure that you do have an opportunity to be involved.
Okay, right, we'll move on then. So we've got Martin next.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. The first point I would say is this is when we're proposing to engage the public, or we're just going to present them with a fait accompli. Place-based meetings have been councillors. Have been taking virtual, so as far as I'm aware, the public haven't had the opportunity to engage. So we do need to, again, reflect on what we said before. In terms of active travel, I'm not aware that there is a strategic route development agreed. We've got lots of disparate bits of active travel route. I think, looking around the room, John, you've got a couple of 100 yards that runs towards your ward, I think, from what was going to be the Fenny Greenway, which was secured under planning permission. Harpreet has got the Birkwood Bradley, which is an adopted highway, but which many people say is not maintained. Cathalia, we got the Dewsbury Greenway, and again there's issues there about maintenance. Gwen has got the infamous Batley Greenway, which residents have been asking for 3 years for barriers to be removed because it puts their children in a dangerous position when they take them to school. Rob and I have talked over many years about enhancing routes up towards Milnes Bridge, and it goes on, but there's nothing that links these. We're not looking at putting in place a coherent network so that people can move around our district without having to go on the roads. I would reflect as well that Kirklees itself, and I've highlighted this again over many years with Peter, about the issue of when Kirklees has developed projects, such as the Calder Valley Greenway, which goes through Dalton, it hasn't developed them in accordance with approved planning permission. So therefore Kirklees is in breach of its own planning permission, but fails to take action to resolve it. It doesn't set a good standard to speak to the public. Looking at some of the things that we've got, as you said, there's a common theme: active travel around schools, and we now have the mode shift and mode stars. What we need is we used to give grants for people to develop school travel plans, but how effective were they implemented? I think going back some time, it was £10,000 to a school if they developed a school travel plan, but were they ever monitored, and was there anything ever done if those active travel plans didn't deliver what they said? Because again, I think it's a commonality that many people will raise, that there are problems parking around schools, traffic problems, and we need to resolve that. So we need to move away. There is a common theme about whether it's prow maintenance or greenway maintenance, because Dewsbury have highlighted in their section walking, cycling network route improvements, tackling overgrown and litter strewn. That's not an improvement to a route, that's a routine maintenance, and these things should be considered when you're developing the routes. And the example of the Spen Valley Greenway, Spen Valley Ringway, which until recently we funded somebody to work on a part-time basis to act as a warden for that. When we're developing these things, we don't put in place the same care that we do for a road. I mean, you look all around the area, and Wakefield Eastern Relief Road's a new one that's coming on. Leeds have got an Eastern Relief Road coming on. The maintenance for those roads will not be left to some group of volunteers. The maintenance will be immediately picked up by the authorities. So we should give the same priority and care to active travel routes. I would express caution about the Huddersfield Central thing about enhancing the broad canal towpath. Experience across the region shows that Canal and Rivers Trust are not an equal partner when we're dealing with them. They will take money, but then they will change things. They will put a barrier in place, which makes it difficult for somebody with an adaptive cycle, a tag along or something to get through. They will change the surfacing so that if they deem it is a rural area, the surfacing will be crushed stone, so that you end up with puddles and very difficult for you to commute in winter. And if we're seeking to increase by a significant number of the people using these corridors, in a lot of cases, canal towpaths are not wide enough to be a good active travel corridor. They don't have the width for the growth in pedestrians, cyclists and other users. And we end up with a conflict between users, especially when you then add into the fact the strength of the anglers and barges. And I say anglers have strength because the Ayr and Calder Canal has recently stopped people using it for barge transport because it was disturbing the fish. So we need to make sure that if we're giving money to another organisation, we have a proper legal agreement in place that if we're giving you millions of pounds to enhance your canal towpaths, this is the result we want out of it. And if you don't deliver, then we won't be funding it. And again, the play space, it talks about new interventions on page 29, 235, to enhance active travel in school settings based on priorities, barriers and concerns. Well, as I said, I've been seeing for 3 years, been raising the fact that there's a wooden barrier on a greenway in Batley. The same style of wooden barrier which were condemned on the Bradley Greenway in 2007 by Christian Walmart when he was on the Cycling England group. And many of you will know Christian was a Labour mayor candidate for London. He came up to Kirklees at my request, reviewed and condemned those wooden barriers, but we're still seeing them in 2022 in Batley, meaning that it creates a danger. So let's remove barriers to access and let's increase people who are cycling. But the key point is, when on earth are we going to consult and communicate this with the people that we're hoping are going to be using them? Because without their support, we're going to be spending money and not getting a good result. Thanks.
Shall I respond to the question about the engagement and consultation? So that is part of the process. So I have attached as an appendix to the report an outline of the framework the Place Partnership leads work to, and you will see that engagement is absolutely a key part of that. And at the next meetings of the Place Partnership, that is one of the things that will be discussed. So once the members have collectively agreed the things that they want to explore a little bit further, they will be planning to do the engagement, and the officers in the team will support that engagement to be undertaken alongside with elected members. I know that some of them are already talking about doing some walks around the area to engage with people, drop-ins, etc. So that definitely will be planned as part of the process, I can assure you. There is, I agree with a lot of the points that you've made, Councillor Bolt, that there is a need to be more connected and joined up across all of the 7. There are some common themes that are starting to emerge. We still need to explore that in a little bit more detail, and then we'll have the relevant conversations with members, with the Cabinet Portfolio Lead and officers to look at how we can bring some of that together. I don't know whether we'll be able to address all of those things through the Place Partnerships active travel funding, because it's limited, but I think the leads are keen that where possible they can elevate some of those priorities to council to look at how we take them forward collectively.
Can I just come in, Councillor Uppal?
Yes.
I think Vina's answered the point very articulately, but I think there's something about how we work out at which scale we are having these conversations. When do we need to have this conversation at a hyper local micro level, because it's a very, very specific issue that exists in a particular community? When do we need to have the conversation at a ward level? When do we need to add some wards together to have place partnerships? And when does it make sense to do something once across Kirklees? And pragmatism is the order of the day on all of those things, isn't it? But at what level and in what detail do we need to have those conversations to achieve the outcomes? And that's kind of a theme that's running through the approach that Vina and I are taking to place-based working.
Thanks, Emlyn. I think that's a very good point. To be honest, I think we're all maybe struggle at times with that, but I think that's a very good point that you make. And Chris might want to come in on that actually, because you brought some of these issues up earlier, so you might want to come in a bit, Chris. But let's take Robert and then Gwen. Robert?
Right, thank you very much indeed. Well, my dealings with this place partnership is completely the opposite to my two colleagues. We've dealt with it at a local level. We've had lots of engagement with the lead member. We've even taken Vina on a walk around the paths of Gawker on a very cold morning at 9 o'clock, wasn't it? We started by with a request from a school. The three schools in Gawker together are all very close. They're all connected not only by road but by paths, and what we have done, and we've already walked those paths. There's talking about 1,000 pupils in the three schools, so there's a lot of community involvement, and we're really wanting to get. We have to get community buy-in rather than not doing things to them, but doing things with them. We've already talked about it, haven't been costed, of course, but improving the path system, which are already tarmac paths. They link the upper and lower Gawker village and the three schools and the park. We've got the Gawker environmental group who are more than pleased to even start planting fruit trees and fruit bushes all on the path, so for anybody to pick when they walk the paths with the prams. The paths are wide enough for prams and bikes. Yes, they do need a bit more lighting. They do need some improvement, but we have linked all sections of the village now. In the Gawker, in the Colne Valley ward, we have split the budget into three. Each ward, because it's so huge, each ward will has different priorities. But we think we're well on the way to this scheme and on this scheme, and would like to thank both Vina and Elizabeth, our lead, who has been very proactive. So for me, it's working very, very well, and I'm hoping that the people of Gawker will vote for that. Thank you.
Thanks, Robert. Some positive comments there. Vina, do you want to say anything?
No, just thank you for the positive feedback, and I will feed that back to the officer that's been supporting as well. Luke, yeah, Luke. It's, I'm glad to hear that it is working. The idea is to work as collaboratively as possible at a local level to ensure that councillors and citizens can engage. We still have some work to do in some areas to get that right. So we will continue to look at how we can improve engagement across the piece.
So I think there's something really important about, not to discount the times when something doesn't work, because there's obviously important learning to gather there as well. But let's learn by what is working and do more of that, because that's how we'll really make progress. So yeah, it's really nice to have your feedback, Councillor Idell. And Vina was very cold on that morning when you took her for that walk. She has mentioned it to me. But yeah, let's learn from what does work as well as what doesn't.
Yeah. When we're meeting in the Conservative Club car park and talking about improving their car park, it shows the breadth of engagement.
It certainly does. Well done. Right, I'll bring in Gwen.
Thanks, Harpreet. Thank you, Vina. I wanted to start by saying thank you to my support, and that's Ashley Fothergill. Without Ashley Fothergill, I think I would have struggled with this, because, to be honest, I feel like a bit like I'm in the lion's den at the moment with you all. So if you've got any questions, I'm happy, but I'll obviously just be speaking on my experience as locality lead for Batley, Burstall and Birkenshaw. Some of the leads, we did agree right from the start that we didn't know what we were doing, and to some of us, it wasn't what we were sold. So it was really important that all the 7 leads met together on a regular basis so that we could share the positives, share the negatives, share good working practice. So all the 7 leads, I believe, have worked really, really well together with support from the officers. Like I say, Ashley Fothergill has been an absolute star. I've enjoyed doing it. I still enjoy doing it. I think there's a lot more work that we can do. Like I say, it wasn't what I was sold. And I would like to try and mould it more into what I want it to, how I want it to work, how I want the locality leads to actually work for me personally. So there's a lot of work that I still want to do on that, moulding it to more of the vision that I thought I was going to be able to work to. Just a couple of points. Martin, it might surprise you when you talk about your barrier that sometimes people don't always agree with you. So, okay. And also, canal towpaths, please remember, they were built for narrow boaters, not for cyclists, not actually for people walking. They were built for narrow boaters and their horses. And a lot of anglers do actually welcome narrow boats because it stirs up the water to bring the fish out. So I just thought I'd add that to you. Yeah, declaration of interest, Martin. Yeah. Right, so I've just scribbled loads of notes down, so just bear with me if it's a bit disjointed. First of all, when it comes to the funding for these projects, it doesn't say anywhere that the money will be split 3 ways or 4 ways, depending on how many wards there are in the locality. We left that open, but it just so worked out that it was agreed that it possibly works better to split the money 3 ways. The mental health, that was really, really interesting. Just backtracking on that, we were here to try and look at any gaps. There were a lot of gaps, and there's still a lot of gaps, but we did some really, really interesting. Again, I can only speak on my locality. But like when it comes to the meetings with the locality leads, with their different ward members, some have experienced really good attendance at the meetings. Some have experienced absolutely, well, no attendance at the meetings. Some locality leads find they get a lot of input from ward members. Some don't get input from ward members. One of the hardest things that has been for me is that when Ashley has sent emails out asking for people's comments, approvals, he's really struggled to get it back. So that has been my biggest hurdle to get over. Active travel. I think during COVID that I found in particular that I got a lot more complaints from local residents complaining about the states of the public rights of way. So I think that, you know, there is a lot of work that we do have to do about the public rights of way. But also with this active travel, it's not just about data intelligence, it's also about local knowledge. I think that's really, really important. And when it does come to like our members in our locality, maybe deciding on specific skills that we want to work with, deciding on different public rights of way, we have to remember that we're working with members of the community, we're working with schools, we're working with different community groups. It's how we sell what we want to do. We might say, yes, we want to do A, B, C, but we can't force like schools to do things that we want to do. We have to work together. We have to listen to each other. We have to work together. And also in our 3 wards, we don't have a lot of paths that actually meet up. So it's really, really difficult to do a joint work on this. But like again, hopefully our members, they've gone away with some homework. They've got to think about what areas that they want to tackle. Who knows, it might end up that we have somewhere that meets up. But when we come to maybe doing any work on the prows, like Robert mentioned about lighting and planting, we have to be creative. It's all right if we're going to start investing in clearing all these paths, but we have to be creative. We have to make people then want to use these paths. So it's really important how we actually do it. And then, like Robert says, he's been out and about. I'm going to encourage our members, if they want to identify any prows, that we will do what I like to call an environmental visual audit of those powers. Right. If anybody wants to ask me any questions, I don't mind. I do really, but I don't. But again, thank you. Like I say, without the support of officers, you know, this would have been a struggle. It's hard work. You won't believe the amount of meetings that we've had, and Ashley and I, he's left the door open for me. I can contact him anytime. He's been absolutely amazing. So thank you.
I will specifically feed that back to Ashley as well, Councillor Lowe. So thank you so much for name checking him, because he is brilliant. You've got to say thanks when it's the right thing to do. So thank you for that.
Thank you. So I've got John and Chris. I was just going to bring in Chris first, John, if that's okay, unless it was a follow-up to Gwen straight away. Is that all right? Okay, great. So Chris.
Thank you, Harpreet. Yeah, I was just a bit confused by some of the discussion there and what this report seems to set out. You've divided up into a number of geographic areas for partnerships, with sort of trying to get people to work together. I sort of live up in Bolster Moor, so I'm in the Colne Valley block there. But now it actually sounds like you're splitting the budgets and just going ward-based, with no real essence of joined up element within that demographic. I'm a little bit worried about that, because when I look at the Colne Valley, it's quite a wide area, as Robert said earlier, and Bolster Moor has got a lot of very broad pathways that go down into Slowett, that go down into Golka. So there's a lot of joined up elements there. And we also find that Bolster Moor is sort of a bit on the fringe, so we don't actually see much activity from the council. So I'm a little confused as to why you started off with this sort of geographical sort of area grouping, and now you're going to ward-based. I don't understand the logic of why you would actually do that if the intention was to encourage people to walk between areas. The other issue I've got is that within our area up here, and sort of when we walk to other places, a lot of areas don't actually have pavements. So there may be a right of way, but it's alongside a road. Now, one thing we're not seeing much of these days is people walking sensibly. So within your sort of approach, you talk about kids walking to school safely. I see a lot of children walking around completely in black clothing, no luminous elements to it at all. And at the moment, I mean, it's quite dark when some of these children are coming out and going to school. Within your sort of strategy, it'd be really good if you actually put some good walking practices in place as recommendations. I mean, the other day I was coming out of Golka, and a lady completely dressed in black was just walking across the road, completely ambivalent to anything going on. The only reason you could see her is because she had to carry a bag that had a bit of white on it. And so if the adults aren't actually doing it, the kids aren't going to do it. But yeah, this seems a really good strategy and everything, but you know, joined up seems to make a lot more sense to me than individual wards doing things. I mean, the Colne Valley is huge in terms of what I understand it to be, and it would be nice to have something joined up. Sorry, a bit of a rant there.
It's not. Oh, go on, Vina. Sorry,
I was going to just come back on join up and the budget. So the budget is allocated to the place partnerships, not to the wards. But as part of the process, it is important that we, as part of the engagement with ward councillors and with citizens, that you know that there is some conversation at a more local level. But where those conversations take place, it should all come back to the place partnership so that they work collectively on the things that they want to prioritise and make the connections across the wards where it's possible to do so. So the budget hasn't been devolved down to the individual wards. It's more about the wards being involved as part of the process and members feeling as if they have part of a role to play in determining their local priorities. There was another question that you asked about walking behaviours, and behaviour change is one of the things that is included in the intelligence pack, and is being explored with the leads and counsellors and with public health colleagues, because it is an important part of the overall programme, is the behaviour change.
Thank you. If ever you want to do a walk around up here, we'd be delighted to give you a walk around, but you better dress warm.
Okay.
Golker's very warm in comparison to Bolston Moor.
Yeah, but you have got a lovely farm shop with really good pork pies.
You can always get a coffee there afterwards, but you've got to cope with the winds before that.
I was just going to
And the
say,
horizontal rain.
well, true. But if you get to go to the cafe afterwards, I would venture up there, definitely. It's a lovely cafe, I've got to say, up there. Right, I've got a couple more then, John and Martin, and then we'll start rounding up if that's okay. John?
Yeah, number of comments, observations, actually. Partly to answer some what Chris has raised around these place partnerships. I have, since they were first proposed as a way of working, Chris, been a harsh critic of place partnerships, because they are a construct. They don't across the whole of Kirklees recognise a sense of place. So Huddersfield Rural is 4 wards. It's the Home Valley, it's Kirkburton and Denby Dale. There isn't any natural affinity between Kirkburton and Denby Dale and the 2 Home Valley wards. There isn't that much in terms of, there are some footpaths that go between them, but actually they look in different directions. It was put together just to make things fit and has never worked well. But to be fair, you're almost in an impossible situation, because wherever you draw the line, you create a boundary. So whether it's at a ward level or a place partnership level, you'll probably find that maybe somewhere where Golker links to Lindley, maybe you're going, well, there's a boundary there then that doesn't work. It's a difficult ask. It's more about reflecting a sense of place and working out where communities are, and they may be at a place partnership level, they may be at a ward level. In my ward, it's so huge, sometimes it's not even at a ward level, it's lower than that. So I think you're damned if you do and damned if you don't, to be honest, Chris, on that one. It's more about people working together and trying to work out what works best for that locality, and it may well be different. I mean, I'm Kathy's on the call. I mean, I'm guessing in Dewsbury, the 3 Dewsbury wards, it probably works reasonably well there, because there is a sense of them all being part of the Dewsbury town. And that's probably one of the better ones in terms of that kind of boundary stuff. I just want to, seeing as Gwen's been singing Ashley's praises, can I just join in with Julie as well? I think Julie has been excellent.
I'll feed that.
And she knows my views on her. But if we're going to get out there, let's make sure we're reflecting, because I think all of the officers that are doing this, it is a very hard ask, as Gwen said. And there is an element of herding cats as well, I think. Well, trying to get us councillors all in the same space.
You can say that, Councillor Taylor. I couldn't possibly comment.
Exactly. I do think splitting the money sometimes is probably a better way of tackling it, where you do have constructs like the one that we've got in Huddersfield Rural. It's far too big. It doesn't work, and they look in different directions. Just to your point about walking behaviours, Chris, one thing we did in my ward a couple of years ago, one of the challenging villages we have for children getting to school is Flockton. A number of people on this call will know well, or I've whinged about Flockton many times in different places, but Barnsley Road is not a great road to walk to school, and it's a very linear village. So we actually funded out of our ward funds high-vis jackets for the school children that have got the school name on them and things, so that they do an element of a little bit of a walking bus, but we made sure they had high-vis jackets, so about supporting that behaviour. And that's the sort of thing that us as councils can sometimes do, albeit we couldn't probably do it everywhere all of the time, but where there are specific issues we can step in and pick up. And I think that was really my major comments, really. I think it's different solutions for different sized areas, and recognising that however you draw boundaries, a sense of place is different in different areas.
Absolutely, Councillor Taylor. I think you make a really valid point, and Vina will know and remember that when I first took on responsibility for this place-based working, I spent quite some time printing out various different maps of how we split Kirklees up into different shaped things, because we've got 23 of these and 7 of these and 9 of these, and then we've got a prime number of something else, and you're like, well, that's not ever going to divide up equally. And then because I'm not very techie, I had to like hold the print ups up over my window so that I could like see where the different boundaries overlapped. And I think the expression is, don't let perfection be the enemy of the good here as well, isn't it? So we need to having place-based conversations at a granular enough level so that communities recognise themselves and can talk about the things that matter to them is the philosophy that's behind this. Sometimes we'll draw a line on a map in a bit of the wrong place and then we'll sort it out afterwards, we'll tweak it, but it's the philosophy of the place-based conversations to get to the heart of the issues that matter to people, and you articulated that beautifully, Councillor Taylor, and it's not always like herding cats.
Us councillors can say that.
Okie dokes. Right, I'll bring in Martin.
Yeah, thanks. Probably just explain something when you were talking about Bolster Moor there. The enthusiasm for people going out for a site meeting seemed to be enhanced by the option of a cafe at the end of it. That probably explains why, when we were supposed to be having cycling site visits some while ago from this group, it never took off. We probably didn't entice you enough with cafes.
Not enough cake.
And cake, those are available, staple parts. Just, Gwen, I've put a link in the chat bar to something that you'd be interested in, where barges have been banned by Canal and Rivers Trust because they were disturbing fish. I'm aware that the network was built, and that was the very point I was making, that before a public body gives money to Canal and Rivers Trust, it needs to make sure that the outcomes match our expectations and are not twisted by Canal and Rivers Trust. I mean, the idea that you can't use a canal by barge because it's disturbing fish seems, particularly for the area in Calder, which is being used as a transport route now from the port back into Leeds, seems to be stupid in my view.
Do you know, Martin, some of the anglers on the canal are the most grumpiest people I've ever met.
Grumpier than barges. Chris raised an interesting point about
grumpier than Martin.
What? Grumpier than? Well, no, you said you were grumpy today, Johnny, with your job. The point about visibility and pedestrian training in schools that Chris raised, I think, is something that's we should look at and benchmark. Leeds Council have for some time had a section called influencing travel behaviour, because I used to work for them, and our job was, as it terms, to go out and support schools doing cycling and pedestrian training, road crossing skills, but also you could support people who were walking to school with high-vis jackets or bags that had it on and that kind of thing. And one thing that I think Leeds is still far ahead of Kirklees in this respect for active travel and school safety is Leeds were putting 20-mile-an-hour zones around all their schools 3 or 4 years ago, even where the schools were on a main road like the Leeds to Wakefield Road at Robin Hood. That school had a 20-mile-an-hour zone outside it to protect the pupils and people going to it. So we could, we need to look at that, but we need to also look at this potential, as I say, for I have one here which we prepared earlier on. The opportunity to support people with high-vis if they wish it. If you're doing walking buses, cycling buses, high-vis stuff like that, when you can get it and promote your safety message, it's fairly cheap. I mean, we had one from Wicker a while ago that's fading now, so I hope Kirklees will get some new high-vis because mine's getting a bit tatty. But let's help. We've got to encourage them. If visibility in the rural areas, it may, and in winter is a key thing, then you don't need bright jackets. So you can have the school bags with flashes on. They can have what we used to call slap bands. You just put these and they go around your wrist or that. loads of, we used to have water bottles with flashing lights on. All these things, you're relatively cheap, but that would be a good use of funding if it encouraged people. Thank you.
If I could just add to that, as part of developing the intelligence packs for each of the 7 areas, we have included good practice examples based on approaches that improve outcomes. But if you have got any other examples, then please let us know, and we will definitely have a look at those and try and incorporate them where it's possible to do so.
Perfect, thank you. Right, I'll bring Gwen in and then we'll sort of start rounding up.
Thanks, Harpreet. Martin, you've just remembered I was once tying our narrowboat up at Hebden Bridge and a cyclist came whizzing past me and I thought I was going to end up in the cut. That was Ashley Fothergill. I've been singing his praises, but that would turn out to be Ashley Fothergill. Can I just say thank you? I just want to say thank you for everybody for their input. Martin, you came up with a lot of good ideas there. They are already in the discussions that we are having. Obviously, we've got a lot of I's to dot and T's to cross. So, but thank you for that. Just thank you to everybody. We've still got a lot of work to do. But like I say, My Place Partnership, I enjoy it. I hope Yusra does. Yusra, you're quiet. Come on.
It's fine. I was just listening to the conversation. Yeah. I'd just like to make a comment really. Thank you for all the work that the team's doing, Vina, Emily and Ashley as well, who's such a fantastic person to work with. And it is really, really interesting to actually work with the communities and hearing them out. And I think that was a key message really that I got from Gwen, is that we need to be listening to the communities at a local level. And Kathy picked up on it as well about working with them rather than doing to them. So I've had a really positive experience. So thank you very much. I'm not all that well, so that's why I've been quite, but yeah, that's my comments. Thank you.
Thanks, Yusra. I know you've been struggling with a chest infection, so thank you for being here and sticking with us as well. And hope you get better soon. I really do. Okie dokes, thanks. I'm just going to quickly round up some of the discussions that we've had. So firstly, I think we want to thank everyone involved, particularly the officers that are supporting this. Appreciate that this isn't a role that they're just doing this, actually. They're doing this on top of everything else they're doing. Vina, I think you're doing about 100 million things, so I don't know how you're really still standing at the moment, to be honest. So it really is great. And I think with Emily and the public health team, it's really important that that's been joined up. Actually, I think that's a really positive thing that we're doing here. So some of the discussions were around consistency, perhaps, amongst the different partnerships. So there's different experience, it appears. So learning from the good practice, as Emily had mentioned before, and how we can share that, amongst the leads and the groups is going to be really important. So engagement of members is important, and trying to make that consistent is important. But input from members is also important, and I do appreciate it. I'm probably not always the best either, so I think we've all got to play our part in making sure we're sort of being active in the process. Now I've got to try and read my writing. Meeting arrangements, I think just making sure, if there's other big things going on where members can't attend, just thinking about sort of when those meetings take place. There was some discussion about public engagement that is in the appendix that Vina attached, but just sort of making sure that that's a big part of the process. Some discussion about geographical sort of localities for this. I think there's always going to be a little bit of difference on each place partnership. But where we can, I think it is important really to try and link up sort of any sort of projects that are going on, and thinking about actually what discussions do we have at this level and what is the more strategic stuff and how is that getting pulled out. I think that's the important one. I think one that's come out on ours is, for example, it's good that we're able to do these projects, but the cost of sort of maintaining some of the stuff that we're doing. And I guess that's the strategic side of it, isn't it? To being able to keep going on with it. You want to be able to do that input that cost work at the beginning, that capital sort of cost, but how do we sort of maintain it sort of longer term? And appreciate, you know, budgets are stretched as they are. And then there was something around sort of partnership working with other agencies. So Martin particularly mentioned the Canal and Rivers Trust, but if where we are perhaps having to explore that partnership or some funding arrangements with them, just having some clear agreements in place, so we know what's expected of all of us. Now, I think that's most of it. I'm going to ask everybody, is there anything that's been missed out, do you think, that we need to include? No, I can't see anything, so I'm going to put the gavel down on this one. Okay, well, thank you so much, everybody. I really appreciate it. And thanks, Cafe, for suffering on your phone and stuff, and joining us.
My arm's aching.
I bet it's aching. You're going to have this really Popeye arm, aren't you, basically, now for the next
one?
So.
At home, but anyway, thank you. And can I just say that your comments have been noted. I think it's been a healthy conversation because not everything's perfect. So it's about working it together. I also wanted to mention that, Martin, some of them ideas that you had, I hope you are going to your place partnership and feeding that through because there's some fabulous ideas. Hear what you said, John. Definitely, but I think it's up to us now to go away and write to every councillor and remind them about them being involved in their place partnership. So yeah, okay, but I think it's been a great conversation. It's one of the best scrutinies, and I will just say a big shout out to Jackie Ingham, one of the place officers. She's outstanding, but equally all the officers that work on this are outstanding. Kathy, I'm going now.
Kathy, you need to get yourself Kathy, you need to get yourself a selfie stick. Then you'll be able to hold it easier.
I've got the tripod and I've left it at home. So it's like, oh. Anyway, enjoy your day, people.
Thank you. Thanks, Kathy.
Sorry, Harper, can I just mention one thing about like members' input, members engaging with the place partnership? One problem that I've been finding, because people aren't picking up the emails, they aren't responding, and then they'll come several months later and start complaining about something that they'd had the opportunity to input earlier on and missed it, and that worries me. That I just think that's a bit unfair. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
just a feeling. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think it's actually quite good having you here because you can provide the what it's been like as a lead as well. So having that experience here is useful. So yeah, I think I mentioned both of them. So I think Jodie, if we just make sure we make those points about. It's important that members are engaged with well, but also, you know, there's expectation that we input as members as well. So I think we just make those 2 points. Okie dokie, Vina and Emily, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councillor Upple, if I didn't before we left say that Vina is doing a brilliant job in this as well. We've talked specifically about other members of the team and the brilliant work they do, but Vina, just the capacity for the detail that she keeps in her head is incredible. So yeah, thank you to Vina as well.
Thank you. And thank you to everybody. It's actually been a really constructive conversation, giving us a lot to think about, which we will certainly do. And if you have any good practice ideas, please let us know and we will share them with the other leads. Thank you.
Absolutely. Perfect. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye. Cheers. Bye. Right, I'm just going to have a quick look at the... So before we get to AOB, let's just go do the work programme. Does anyone have any comments about the work programme? Give you a couple of seconds. No. I mean, just to say, obviously, there's been a lot going on in our scrutiny panel, and there might be some sort of discussions about how, you know, how do we make sure that everything that needs to be covered is covered, sort of going forward. So I think there'll be some conversations more generally about that, and it is something I've raised because we want to make sure that everything that we can cover is covered as well. Okie dokie. Right, what we're going to do then is go back to this business about the minutes. So I've been trying to have a bit of discussion with Jodie about this while we're on the call, while we're in the meeting, should I say, not on the call. So Jodie, do you want to explain what we can do right now in terms of amending the minutes? I'm going to let you do it so I don't mess up here.
Yeah, that's fine, Chair. So in respect to the minutes, we can agree to approve them subject to an amendment that reflects what the panel members have discussed and suggested today. But I suppose we went to a vote earlier, and Chair, you said that we could possibly vote again at the end or discuss it further. It's up to you what action you want to take at this stage. We could vote again, or we could resolve to, in terms of the recommendation, we could resolve to discuss it with more time at the next meeting. Possibly with an invite to an officer to answer any questions. But if you do choose to vote today, we need to be very clear on what you are voting on.
Yes, I think that's probably, for me, I think we have actually had the vote before, but I'm open for you to have a bit of a discussion about this. I don't want to come across as I'm trying to stifle anything, but I think there's just some discussion to be had about what would you want as a recommendation. I fully agree, actually, engagement is really important. We must try and get as much public engagement as possible. What I'm not sure about is, for example, what exactly we would want that recommendation to be. There's discussion about a target as well. So I'll tell you what, let me bring in John first, because you brought this up initially, and then we'll bring in Martin. So go ahead.
What I said at the last meeting, and I still stand by, is that our public consultation that we do and engagement with the public has to be credible. What we talked about at the last meeting, the numbers of people who've contributed, given the size of the areas we were looking at, didn't feel that met my or the general public's view of what would be engaging with a significant proportion of the population. Now, as you know, I'm a huge advocate of place standards, because place standards work when you do it properly, which is you go and talk to people who don't want to talk to you. I think what has been an error, and it's partly COVID has driven this, so it's not a criticism, but we've allowed ourselves to get into a position where we hand out forms rather than talk to people. And as a result, you get less back, hence the reason why we had such small responses. So for it to be a credible public engagement, there ought to be a bar which has to be achieved. Now, I don't know what that is, and I'm not saying we should set that. I'm saying that's something that we should ask officers to look at. But for it to be taken as a credible view of the public, there needs to be some sort of criteria set about the number. I'm not sure how you define it. That's probably work that needs to be done. But there needs to be some sort of consideration about, unless it meets this bar, you can't view it as a valid engagement. And I worry that this council seems to do lots and lots of engagements, but doesn't reach lots and lots of people. And quite often, a lot of the people that are doing online responses are the same faces. So if we're going to do public engagement, we need to be clear about what the engagement methodology is. And in defining that methodology, that also includes what the bar to success is, or the criteria for success is. And sometimes, and you know, when I did my place standard engagements in my ward, we were looking at the data as it came in. We did them over 3 weeks to make sure we were getting sufficient responses, and also we were looking at the demographics, you know, the sort of age ranges, the you know, genders, etc., to make sure that we were covering a cross section of the population as well. And we were ready to go back and almost target women over 65 or men under 40 or something if we needed to. As it turned out, we didn't need to. We were sufficient, but we were looking at that to make sure that the responses we got back, we could be confident that they were reflective of the general population. And that's what we should be doing. And if it was anything that was done, and Peter might want to come in here because he's got experience of this, but if this was anything that was done by an external organisation, they absolutely would do something like that. And that's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, just on that point, I think I agree with you that perhaps it might be a good time actually for them to have a look and just say, you know, have a further exploration of the sort of engagement criteria methodology that they're using for consultation exercises. And, you know, maybe there has been impact of the current context, or maybe it's wider. It's something that they can certainly explore. What I would say is sometimes when other organisations do sort of big, whether it's a survey or consultation or whatever, is that they'll carry it out and they might have an expectation of where they might want to be, but even if they don't meet it, what they normally do is they'll still publish it, but they'll put some degree of accuracy around it. What then they'll say, because the level of response we've got, we would say that actually there's this degree of accuracy around it. So it's not necessarily that they don't publish it afterwards, they just put some sort of marker on it. So it's just worth having a consideration of these different things and understanding actually what is going out there, you know, is going on out there in the world that does this type of work, which I certainly don't have an expertise on. Right, let me bring in Martin, and then Peter might want to just sort of, we've got Gwen as well, right? Martin, then Gwen, and then we'll see what Peter has to say as well.
Yeah, I do agree that we ought to look at what is an acceptable minimum return. You know, some of these we're spending huge amounts on, and bearing in mind it, you know, Peter expressed his sentiments very strongly. I think, you know, this is something where, if you like, it could be Peter's legacy with the council, that if in future there is a minimum requirement because of the debate that we've said here, I don't know what that would be, but as we've alluded to before, when we looked last time, there was 147 people from Heckman-White. Peter's views were quite far on that. You know, you need to make sure that you are getting a representative, or at least an indicative response from the public before you start spending this money. But yeah, I think I want to come on as well about other points in a minute, but I'll come back to those when we've concluded this discussion, because that's what I wanted to raise now. Thanks.
Okay, Gwen?
Yeah, thanks, Harpreet. Some really good points talked about there. If you are going to set a percentage, are you just going to pluck a random figure? I don't know how you can actually set a percentage. I think COVID did have a massive impact on the one in Batley, because even though we had a drop in at the library, I think people were still very nervous about actually coming in and chatting. We also did a stall as well at Batley Marketplace, handing out the packs and talking to people. I think some people might have been put off by the length of the details in the pack, what we were asking of people. I think ours was quite a bit maybe too much for people, you know, but like you start filling in forms and you get halfway through and you think, oh gosh, you know. So I do think COVID had an impact on that as well. I think if it had been the good old days where we could have had an open event where people would have come in, I think we might have got a lot more people responding. But even though, I don't know, was ours a high return? Was it a low return for something like this? I don't know. I've got nothing to measure it against. But obviously, we got some very, very comprehensive responses with our consultation as well. And we have gone back out. We have lengthened it a bit. So let's just see if we get anything. But obviously, if we're on a timescale to be able to actually, you know, say, right, thank you, the consultation's now closed, we need to move on because we're on a time limit to actually start spending the money. There's a lot involved. Yeah. So thank you.
Yeah, and John?
Yeah, just responding to Gwen. Just to give you a comparison, Gwen, when we did place standard just in the village of Shepley, we got over 600 responses. And that was because, and I can't emphasize this enough, and I keep saying this in every meeting, we went and spoke to people who didn't want to speak to us, and we had the conversation. We spent 5 minutes filling in the form. If you give them the form to take away, they won't fill it in. That is our experience and our understanding. And all you get in terms of responses back are the same old people who respond. So you're not getting a genuine representative feel for the whole of the whole of the community. You need to go to places where people are, not wait for people to come to you. We held a couple of open sessions in the library. Like your experience, very few people turned up. People don't. People have busy lives. We have to put ourselves out. So like I've said in the past, you know, I went and stood outside the co-op on a Friday night when people were going in to get a bottle of wine and talk to them. It's that sort of thing. It's no good doing on a Wednesday afternoon, we're going to have the library open and we're going to invite people to come in and put some publicity out, because they won't turn up. Doesn't matter how many times you do it, it won't happen. I'm not sure what the criteria is, whether it's a percentage or not, Gwen, whether it's a percentage or a number, but it needs to be, you know, if you look at the demographics, that you know, in that sense, it's representative as well. We were worried that we might get a gender imbalance that, you know, again, would, dependent on what questions you're asking, what consultation you're doing, but that could skew your thinking if you have a gender imbalance in there as well. So these are sort of things that need to be in place, and there needs to be rig around it. And just to say, you know, I think the highest number out of the 4 towns was Home Firth, and they had 400 and something from memory. But again, you know, I got more than that in one small village. You know, there needs to be some more thought about, is this representative of the population we're trying to talk to? If it's not, as Harpit said, do you put some qualifying statements around it, or do you go, we're not going to accept it as a valid engagement, we need to do something else some other way, extend it, do it for longer? But I think we need our scrutiny panel to make those points in the minutes, in the response back, and then ask for a response back to that. I'm not saying what the answer is. I'm saying that we need to develop an answer, because what's happening at the moment clearly isn't working.
Sorry, can I just come back in there on a couple of things that John has said? John's consultation, when I got a really good return in Shepley, that was one area in his ward. This is for the whole of Batley.
Yeah.
And we don't actually have the bodies to go out into all the different areas in Batley to do what you did in one concentrated area. That is so much easier. And obviously it was a totally different consultation as well. So, but we can't force people.
No, you don't. You just don't talk to them.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, that's what we were doing when we had the stall in the marketplace. We were talking to people, and then they were taking the packs away. We can't stand over them and make them fill them in, can we?
No, but you could fill them in 5 minutes. We would fill them in 5 minutes. That's the point. If you gave it to them and took it away, you wouldn't get it back when.
Yeah. Okay.
I would have come and done it with you.
Let me bring in Chris now.
One as well.
Okay, let me bring in Chris, because we've still got another point that Martin wants to bring in about something else with the minutes. So, Chris.
Thanks, Harpreet. I mean, in a previous life, I used to do a lot of this sort of work. And I think the key here is that there is no magic percentage. You cannot set that. I mean, I think we all accept that. But the only way to actually really get the answers that we needed, not the answers we wanted, the answers we needed, was to look at the key influences that were going to make that the answer we needed. And in order to do that, we had to split the populations that we were dealing with. So we had to say, we need some of these, we need some of those, we need some of the others. And then once we got the answers from that group of people, we then had to test that against the whole demographic that we were dealing with. And then in some cases, we had to go back and revisit because we hadn't got the right answer. But the key to it all is, have you got a significant answer? Now, I think the last time we looked at this, it did not appear to be a significant answer. Now, I'm sure a huge amount of work went into getting that getting the answers that were in the reports. But we actually really need then to break that down into groups. I don't know what the groups are, because I think that Simon and his team would have actually looked at the groups. But there is no magic percentage. I could not vote and say, we've got to have 30%. We've got to have 10%.
Yeah.
Because it might be a totally wrong 10% or wrong 30%. That's my 5 pence.
Yeah, I mean, basically you've put it more eloquently than I was trying to do. I agree with that, Chris. And I think my first job, that's one of the things I did, was around housing. And it was difficult. Even then we were, you know, we might have thought we wanted a certain percentage. And even then you're kind of going off what you think is right. You're not clear on some industry standard. And a lot of time you're not meeting what you need. So one of the things we did was just make a clear marker about, you know, what we did get back and where it was a lot lower than perhaps what we'd looked at other work that we'd done. We'd put some explanation about that. I want to try and sort of round this up and think about what could the recommendation be that everyone would be sort of happy with. If not, then I think we need to explore this further at a different meeting. That could be the other option, is that we look at it in more detail and ask officers to come back and we do a session around this in particular. So there could be something to say, a recommendation that says something like there should be consideration of the engagement criteria and methodology that the council uses for public consultation and engagement exercises. And we, on top of that, we could say we want this to come back to a further meeting. Now, I don't know if people would be happy with that.
I'm not sure what that actually says.
So what I'm trying to say is, I don't think we can set we can say right now there should be some minimum standard, because I don't think any of us agree what that is. So what we're saying is there should be further consideration of the criteria or explanation of the criteria and methodology that we're using for engagement exercises. Yes, John, you've got your hand up.
So I think it needs to say that there has to be an agreed minimum standard. I'm not saying what that is. I'm not saying that that's numbers, percentages or anything. I really don't know. But there needs to be, probably different for every consultation, but it needs to be agreed up front that what an acceptable standard is. In the ones that we were looking at last time, nobody had done that. And I think a lot of us felt uncomfortable that the numbers were adequate for the size of the population we were trying to engage with. So I think it needs to say something. There does need to be a minimum criteria, whatever that is, and we need the officers to come back with views on what that might be. All we're doing is scrutiny, is making recommendations.
For me, I don't feel necessarily comfortable with that, because I'm not clear what that minimum standard should be. I think this conversation is probably something that needs to be a bit longer now, to be honest, and I'm just wondering, is this something we should be looking at a little bit more detail as a panel? Yeah. And bring some officers in who can give us, you know, from their side, their perspective, tell us what they are doing, if they have got some criteria in place that we're not aware of, and then we can, you know, have a little bit more of a discussion on it. Joda, I could see you sort of flashing, and I'm sorry, I've got Martin as well, and then I need to move on. Joda, did you want to come in at this stage?
Yeah, I was going to say, from the discussion, it just sounds like to me that having more time set aside to really go through this in more detail might be more beneficial, so the panel has time to come to some clear recommendations.
Okay, Martin?
I think we're conflating two issues. John started off saying quite rightly that the minutes needed to reflect what we discussed last time, that we needed to see something of a minimum or higher standard. What we're now talking about is what that is. So splitting the two in, yeah, let's, if we can get consensus or agreement that that's what we discussed last time, and to take it forward, then yeah, it probably does need more work than we can allocate. And that may involve benchmarking with our neighbours or others. You know, what do other authorities, organisations or anything else use as a minimum level? I mean, again, Peter's reflected on his long time in academia, and again, because it was Peter's comments, what does Peter think would be a meaningful public response, so that in future the member sat there is not coming out with the strong statements that Peter came out. So I think we've got two things. If we can agree that yes, we said that we wanted to see that we said it last time, and it should be encapsulated and everything, because that part of the debate wasn't encapsulated. But moving forward, we can't invent something. You know, we need to look at, speak to other people in industry. There used to be people under Dave Harris's organisation that used to do this, and I think some of them organisation in spiral communication. So what in public terms is an acceptable public response?
Okay, I'm going to start moving on now because we really need to get on to the next stage. So there is some reflection of this in the minutes where it says that in response to a question from the panel regarding engagement through the place standard exercise and the percentage of responses. So there is a little bit of that in the minutes. We can reflect that some members in the minutes, some members also suggested there should be a minimum standard, but we're not agreed on that as a recommendation, I don't think. So, and then I think we need to probably come back and have a look at this in further detail. So can we move on from that?
So I agree with moving on, but I just want to record my disappointment.
Yeah,
because
sure.
I thought we had agreed that in the last meeting, because nobody expressed a contrary view,
right,
or that it wasn't an agreement. And we've never ever in this scrutiny panel, whilst I've been on it, had things where things have been suggested, everybody's kind of nodded and gone along with it, and it's not been included as part of the feedback and recommendations of the panel. So we're treating this differently to what we've always done in the past. I accept that's what you're going to do, Harpit, but I am going to register my disappointment that nothing was said in the last meeting to contrary, and now after the event there's an attempt to suggest that something wasn't agreed when we had a discussion, the points were made, nobody raised anything, and ordinarily in every other meeting that's how we've operated. So
sorry, John,
I
I just
accept you're moving on, but I can't express more strongly my disappointment with the way you've managed it.
Fair enough. I'm happy to take on your disappointment, so thanks for that. We'll please make a note of that, Jodie. That is that Councillor Taylor is disappointed. Happy for that to go on. I can't remember, to be honest, John. I can't remember what was actually agreed.
Well, if you can't remember, why are you objecting to us? Those of us who can remember.
What I'm saying, I really want to move on now. So can we just move on? I think let's Martin very quickly, and then perhaps we can come back to. I think maybe the best thing is that we come back to this now because I haven't got the recording in front of me. So
thanks, Alfred.
Yeah.
In response to a question from the panel, that where you said it's recorded.
Yes.
What is recorded in there, and what should be, is the cabinet member's response. This is crucial to what we talk about now. Yeah, Peter. He said it was pathetic, meaningless, and based on his academic experience, nobody would use that. That's a cabinet member's response. And it should be recorded for the minutes. It shouldn't just be left recorded in the media and things.
Okay, I'm happy for that to go in. I don't really have a problem with that. So we can we'll amend the minutes to include what the cabinet member said. So John, I don't know what to do about your point because I can't say right now what the actual thing was that was in the recording. So what we can do is say that we'll go back and have a look at the recording and just check what was agreed when we went through the recommendation summary. Can we do that? And then then we can be clear what was actually agreed to. Let's do that and then we can come back to it. Is that all right?
Yeah. All I want them to do is come back. I mean, at the end of the day, I want officers to go away and reflect on the views of this scrutiny panel that said we felt uncomfortable with what was presented to us and things need to be done differently. And I'm not setting standard minimum criteria or anything like that. I just think we need to develop something that does set some standard criteria so that in future we do it properly.
I guess I agree with what you're saying. I think it's understanding what is there one out there and is there one that's used. But I see what you're saying. Let's just double check what was actually agreed in the recording and then we'll reflect that. Well, we can discuss that at the next meeting and then agree. Is that all right, Jodie? Can we do that for now? Can we sort of have a bit of a holding pattern until we have a look at the recording?
Yeah, that's completely fine. So I'll just summarise what we've agreed. Right, so we are going to amend the minutes of the previous meeting to reflect the discussion that was had, including this discussion in today's minutes. We're then going to look back on what was recorded in the discussion, and we can discuss that in the next meeting of the panel. And that's what's been agreed.
Yeah, and we agreed to put in what the cabinet member said at the time
Yeah.
About the engagement. Peter, do you want to say anything at this stage? Have we lost you, Peter?
He must have the worst Wi-Fi of all of us, doesn't he? He always has problems with his Wi-Fi.
I think he's having a problem. All right, I think we'll have to leave it there. We're a little bit over, so I want to try and get things closed up. So, all right, Peter, if you contact us if you want to discuss it later, but obviously we're struggling to hear anything. Right, Martin, is there another point, or can we?
Yeah, thanks, Harpreet. Yeah, page 3 of minutes of the papers, the third para down, the issue that we raised about the cost of consultants with Simon Taylor. My recollection was, it's very vague here. It said information at a later date. It was after the meeting. We haven't had, and it should be basic information that was questioned by several members of the panel, how much a consultant's costing. I don't have that information with me. I'll provide it after the meeting. Here we are.
You provided information to us, Martin.
Yeah,
we got
I
that
thought
information. We got an email from Simon with that information, which was forwarded on from.
I don't think that broke down the cost of those consultants, did it? We
got the information that we requested. I don't think we need further information. We got an email, and I think that's been put in the public domain. Gwen's got to go now. So, all right, Gwen, thank you very much. A lot of that's actually been in the public domain.
I agree with you, Harper. I remember we did get information.
Yeah, we did. I feel comfortable with that, to be honest, Martin, with what we've received. And like I said, there's even more in the public domain now as well. So that's where I am on that one.
Yeah, well, I've got an email from Simon, and I've asked how much it cost for Kirklees staffing and things like that. And again, I'm getting the information together. I'm just looking for the email that you referred to see whether it actually. I don't recall us having that, but it may be.
We got a new. I think you might have not been necessarily happy with what was provided, but I think it met what we asked for. And I think if you've got further things that you want to raise, you can do that as an individual, but I think what we'd asked for we'd received, to be honest, as a panel. Yusra's got to go now as well. Thank you, Rosetta.
I'm really sorry I've got another meeting, but thank you. Take care, guys.
Go ahead. Thank you. So
bye. Good day.
Bye. I'm comfortable with what we've received. So
after I just had a quick search for Simon, I can't find the.
It's come from Jodie, Martin. Jodie sent it. So. And we got the information from Simon, so I'm comfortable with what we've received on that. Right. Okay. Obviously, as a member, you can keep following up, and I'm sure you will do yourself. So I don't think there's an issue
with that and getting the fire report, which we were promised 3 times, because that never came either.
That's not me, but
I know, it's the same. Yeah, we get promised things at meeting and they never materialise.
Yeah. Let's move on then. No. I think you've made clear on that comment. Now, Peter, I can see you. Can you hear us now? No. Okay, that's it. I'm going to end the meeting because we've gone over quite a bit as well. So thank you everybody for joining us. A bit of a marathon meeting. I'm going to go sit down in a cold room now. So thank you very much, everyone, and thanks for everyone who joined us as well.
Just before you run off, just some point, not now, but you've been briefed on Huddersfield Market. I wouldn't mind at the next meeting just a bit of an update on what, or if there's any information you can share. Just because I'm interested, to be honest. I haven't got any issues, but I am interested in what. Because I got involved in some of the market stuff a couple of years ago, so I'd be interested in anything that's happening on. It just says on the last page.
Yeah, I'm just wondering as well if we're that we might be able to cover some of that in the next meeting as well.
Well, we are talking about cultural heart and stuff in the next meeting.
I think probably then it'd be helpful to get a bit of we'll get an update there as well. So we'll ask for that to be covered as well. Perfect. That's fine. Yeah. Okay, everybody. Lovely to see you. And goodbye. Thank you.